Section 1 Introduction. The Birth of the Persian Empire. Welcome, dear listeners, to this journey through time. Tonight we'll explore one of history's greatest empires, the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Its rise, dominance, and eventual fall offer an unparalleled glimpse into the cycles of power culture and ambition. The Persian Empire's story begins in the mid-6th century BCE, in a land now known as Iran. In the heart of the ancient Near East, this land was home to the Medes and Persians, two groups of Indo-European peoples with a long and rich history. But it was not until a young, ambitious leader emerged from the Persian tribe named Cyrus the Great that this land would see the birth of one of the largest empires the world had ever known. Cyrus was born around 600 BCE in the city of Anshan, part of the Persian realm. But he was more than just a ruler. He was a visionary, someone who could unite a fragmented region and turn it into a superpower. At the time, the Medes had already established a powerful kingdom in the region, and their king Astyages ruled over the land. However, the Persians were rising in power under Cyrus's leadership. In 550 BCE, Cyrus set out to challenge his grandfather, Astyages. The conflict between the Persians and the Medes was not just about territory, but about identity and dominance. Cyrus, known for his clever strategy and charisma, managed to rally the Persians, and through a series of tactical moves, he defeated the Medes. The battle for the Median throne marked the beginning of the Achaemenid Empire. But Cyrus did not simply conquer the Medes. He recognized the value in integrating them into his empire. Instead of eradicating them or seeking revenge, he brought them into his fold, establishing a unity that would serve as a model for his future conquests. This was one of the defining features of the Persian Empire, a unique blend of conquest and diplomacy with the capacity to respect local traditions and structures while enforcing imperial authority. This was the birth of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. The year was 550 BCE, and Cyrus, the new king of Persia, would soon turn his attention toward expanding his newly unified kingdom. As he extended his rule eastward, he quickly took over the rich lands of Lydia, modern-day Turkey, and the wealthy city of Babylon in 539 BCE, marking one of the most significant conquests of his reign. The fall of Babylon was particularly important, as it solidified Cyrus's status as not just a conqueror, but a liberator. He entered Babylon not as a tyrant, but as a hero to its people. His famous Cyrus Cylinder, often considered the first declaration of human rights, showcased his policies of tolerance and respect for local customs and religions. He allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem, freeing them from Babylonian captivity, a gesture that earned him a lasting reputation as a just ruler. Cyrus's political vision was not just about land and power. It was about creating an empire that could last. He understood that military might alone was not enough to hold an empire together. A sense of unity, respect for diversity, and strategic alliances were essential to maintaining control over his vast territories. The early years of the Persian Empire under Cyrus were marked by rapid expansion. But as the empire grew, so did the complexity of ruling it. Cyrus's success was built on his ability to balance military conquest with cultural diplomacy, forging a lasting legacy that would lay the foundation for his successors. But how did a relatively small tribe of Persians rise to dominate such a large part of the ancient world? The answer lies in Cyrus's approach to leadership and his understanding of governance. He managed to unite a fragmented region, adapt to the diverse cultures he encountered, and maintain control over an ever-expanding territory. His vision, combined with his military genius and political acumen, set the stage for the grandeur of the Achaemenid Empire. Thus, the Persian Empire, under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, was born. It would go on to conquer vast lands, reach the height of its power, and leave a profound mark on the world. But as we'll see in the next chapters, even the mightiest of empires are vulnerable to the forces of time, politics, and ambition. Section 2. Cyrus the Great, the Founding Father, c. 559–530 BCE. To understand the Achaemenid Persian Empire's birth, we must first delve into the life of its founder, Cyrus the Great. His rise from a young prince to the ruler of one of history's largest empires is nothing short of extraordinary. Born around 600 BCE in the city of Anshan, Cyrus was a member of the Persian royal family, but his early life was not marked by privilege alone. His lineage, though noble, was fraught with the challenges of political rivalries and regional instability. As a boy, Cyrus would have grown up in the midst of a politically volatile environment. The Medes under King Astyages ruled much of Persia and surrounding areas. But while the Medes held power, the Persians were rising under the leadership of his father, Cambyses I. It was a clash of two worlds, the established power of the Medes and the growing influence of the Persians. As a child, Cyrus would have witnessed his family's aspirations for greater power, setting the stage for his future path. In 559 BCE, after his father's death, Cyrus ascended to the throne of Anshan. However, his ambitions were not limited to this small province. Even as a young king, Cyrus had a bold vision for Persia. He was determined to unify the Persian and Median peoples, and to challenge the rule of his grandfather, King Astyages. Cyrus's early conquest of the Medes in 550 BCE was a turning point in the history of the ancient world. His victory was not merely the result of military might, but also the product of political genius. After defeating the Median forces, Cyrus did not rule with an iron fist. Instead, he forged an alliance with many of the Medes, offering them positions in his new government. This approach, which would become a hallmark of his reign, showed his deep understanding of governance. By incorporating the Medes into his administration, Cyrus ensured that the foundation of his empire was built on cooperation rather than division. But Cyrus's ambitions stretched far beyond the Medes. In 546 BCE, he turned his attention to Lydia, a kingdom rich in wealth and resources. The Lydian king Croesus believed that his kingdom was invincible. Famous for his vast riches, Croesus had consulted the oracle of Delphi, who predicted that if he attacked the Persians, he would destroy an empire. With this prophecy in mind, Croesus launched an ill-fated invasion. However, Cyrus, with his brilliant military tactics, outmaneuvered Croesus, defeating him at the Battle of Thymbra in 546 BCE. This victory was pivotal as it gave the Persians control over the western Anatolian region, a key area of trade and culture. Following this conquest, Cyrus turned his attention to the famed city of Babylon. In 539 BCE, he led an army into Babylon and conquered the city without a significant battle. Cyrus's conquest of Babylon is one of the most remarkable in history. The Babylonian king Nabonidus had alienated many of the city's inhabitants, particularly the Jews. Cyrus, in contrast, was seen as a liberator. His conquest was accompanied by proclamations of religious tolerance promising the return of exiled peoples to their homelands. The famous Cyrus Cylinder, often considered the first charter of human rights, symbolizes this commitment. In it, he declared the return of the Jews to Jerusalem and the restoration of their temple, a move that solidified his reputation as a just ruler. Cyrus's victories, however, were not just military. His leadership was also characterized by a profound respect for local customs and religions. As he expanded his empire, he allowed conquered peoples to maintain their traditions and governance as long as they paid tribute to the Persian king. This was a strategy that not only minimized resistance, but also allowed Persia to manage a vast, diverse empire with relative stability. Cyrus's reign, lasting until his death in 530 BCE, established the Achaemenid Empire as a formidable power. Under his rule, the Persian Empire expanded rapidly, incorporating lands from Anatolia to the Indus River. His empire was vast, yet he understood the importance of unity. He implemented the satrapy system, dividing the empire into provinces, each governed by a satrap or local ruler who was accountable to the king. Yet Cyrus was not only concerned with conquest. He was a statesman who laid the groundwork for future prosperity. He built infrastructure, improved trade routes, and fostered cultural exchange. He encouraged the building of cities and the development of art, literature, and religion. But his most enduring legacy lies in the empire. He created a vast, multi-ethnic and multi-religious empire that would endure long after his death. In the final years of his life, Cyrus led an expedition against the Massagetae, a nomadic tribe in Central Asia. It was here that he met his end. In 530 BCE, during a battle against the Massagetae led by their queen Tomyris, Cyrus was killed. His death marked the end of an era. Yet his empire would continue under his heirs, who sought to preserve and expand his vision. Cyrus the Great remains one of history's most remarkable leaders, not just for his military conquests, but for his political foresight, cultural tolerance, and ability to unite diverse peoples. His empire, built on the foundations of respect, cooperation, and strategy, would go on to become one of the greatest in history. And as we'll explore in the following chapters, his successors would work to build upon his legacy, facing new challenges as the empire expanded further. Section 3. The Satrapy System. A masterpiece of governance. One of the key innovations that allowed the Achaemenid Empire to grow from a regional power to one of the largest empires in history was the establishment of the satrapy system. This administrative system, devised by Cyrus the Great and further refined by his successors, would become the cornerstone of Persian governance. Understanding this system is crucial for grasping how the Persians managed their vast and diverse territories. The satrapy system was designed to address one of the most pressing challenges of empire building: how to effectively govern a vast and multi-ethnic realm. By the time of Cyrus's death in 530 BCE, the Persian Empire stretched from the Mediterranean in the west to the Indus River in the east, encompassing an array of different peoples, languages, religions, and customs. Managing such an extensive empire required a decentralized approach, which is exactly what the satrapy system offered. At its core, the satrapy system divided the empire into a series of provinces called satrapies, each of which was governed by a satrap. The word satrap itself comes from an ancient Persian term that can be translated as protector of the province or governor. Satraps were often chosen from the local nobility, allowing for a balance of Persian oversight and local power. This structure ensured that the Persian king maintained control while also allowing for local autonomy, which helped keep peace and fostered loyalty among the empire's diverse peoples. The role of a satrap was multifaceted. They were responsible for the administration of their province, overseeing its economy, maintaining security, and managing the local population. They collected taxes, which were sent to the royal treasury, and ensured that the king's decrees were enforced. In addition to these duties, satraps had a military role. They were expected to raise and maintain armies in case of external threats or internal uprisings. Despite this significant power, satraps were never fully independent. The Persian kings, especially during the reign of Darius I from 522 to 486 BCE, took great care to ensure that the satraps remained loyal. Darius, in particular, implemented measures to check the power of the satraps. He employed a network of spies known as the eyes and ears of the king, who would report back on the activities of the satraps. This intelligence network helped to ensure that any disloyalty or corruption could be swiftly addressed. The satrapy system was not just about governance. it was also a means of integrating the various peoples of the empire into the broader Persian political system. By appointing local rulers as satraps, the Persians ensured that these provinces retained a degree of autonomy and local culture. This created a sense of inclusion, which made the empire more stable and less prone to rebellion. Many of these satraps were granted considerable power and wealth, but their loyalty to the Persian king was always monitored, ensuring the stability of the empire. One of the most impressive aspects of the satrapy system was its flexibility. The Persian Empire was vast, and its provinces were diverse, ranging from the Greek cities in the west to the Persian heartland, and from the mountainous regions of Armenia to the deserts of Egypt. The system allowed for these provinces to be governed according to their local customs and needs, while maintaining Persian control. For example, in Egypt, a traditionally independent region with its own rich culture, the Persians allowed local priests to retain significant influence, and they respected Egyptian religious practices. In contrast, in the more militarized regions of the East, Persian control was more direct and centralized. Darius I, who ascended to the throne after the death of Cambyses II, is often credited with refining and perfecting the satrapy system. Under Darius's rule, the empire expanded further, and the need for effective governance became even more critical. Darius's reforms streamlined the system, creating more efficient administrative structures. He divided the empire into 20 satrapies, each with its own distinct administrative organization. These reforms were designed not only to maintain control over such a vast empire, but also to promote trade communication and economic stability. One of the most significant reforms under Darius was the introduction of standardized taxation and the use of a single currency. The Persian royal coinage known as the daric became a symbol of the empire's power and its ability to control trade and resources. With a unified economic system, trade flourished, and the empire became a hub for commerce and culture. The Royal Road, another of Darius's major projects, connected the eastern and western parts of the empire, facilitating the movement of goods, people, and information across vast distances. This infrastructure allowed the satraps to manage their provinces more effectively, as messages and orders from the king could travel quickly and trade routes remained open. The satrapy system was, however, not without its flaws. While it offered a degree of local autonomy, it also led to the emergence of powerful satraps who sometimes sought to assert their independence. The most notable example of this was the satrap of Egypt, who under the reign of Darius's successors rebelled against the central authority, marking a significant challenge to the stability of the empire. These uprisings were often met with swift military responses, but they also highlighted the inherent dangers of a decentralized governance system. Despite these challenges, the satrapy system played a vital role in the longevity and success of the Achaemenid Empire. It allowed Persia to govern a vast and diverse territory, ensuring that the empire remained strong for over 2 centuries. The system's flexibility and adaptability ensured that it could manage the complexities of different regions while maintaining the authority of the Persian king. By the time of the empire's decline in the late 4th century BCE, the satrapy system had become deeply ingrained in Persian governance. It was a system that blended local autonomy with imperial control, creating a lasting legacy that influenced future empires. Through the satrapy system, the Achaemenid Persian Empire set the standard for imperial governance in the ancient world, a system that was emulated by later powers, including the Roman and Byzantine empires. Section 4, Cambyses II, Expansion and Conquest. Following the death of Cyrus the Great in 530 BCE, the Persian Empire was handed down to his son, Cambyses II. Though his reign was brief, lasting only 8 years, Cambyses would leave an indelible mark on Persian history. His military campaigns expanded the empire even further, but his reign also marked the beginning of internal instability and political strife, which would ultimately weaken the empire in the years to come. Cambyses II was an ambitious ruler inheriting an empire that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus River. His most significant achievement was the conquest of Egypt, one of the wealthiest and most culturally distinct regions of the ancient world. The conquest of Egypt, however, was not a straightforward affair, and it would prove to be a double-edged sword for the Persian Empire. In 525 BCE, Cambyses led a massive campaign against Egypt. The Egyptian pharaoh Psamtik III was unable to mount a successful defense, and Cambyses' army captured the ancient city of Memphis. This victory marked the fall of Egypt and its incorporation into the Persian Empire as a satrapy. Cambyses took on the title of pharaoh, solidifying Persian control over the Nile River Valley. The conquest of Egypt was significant for several reasons. First, it gave the Achaemenid Empire access to Egypt's wealth, especially its grain, which was crucial for feeding the empire's growing population. Egypt also became an important military base for the Persians, as it served as a strategic point for further expansions into Africa and the Mediterranean. Additionally, the conquest marked the Persian Empire's entry into North Africa, a region it would dominate for centuries. However, Cambyses' conquest of Egypt was not without complications. His reign was marked by harsh rule and cultural insensitivity. Cambyses, like many conquerors before him, sought to suppress the native Egyptian culture and religion. He famously ordered the destruction of Egyptian temples, including the temple of Amun at Siwa, and even defiled the sacred statue of the god Apis. These actions alienated many Egyptians and sowed the seeds of resistance against Persian rule. Despite his successes, Cambyses' reign was plagued by turmoil. His personality was erratic, and his actions often seemed driven by paranoia. The most notorious incident was his supposed murder of his brother Smerdis, whom he feared was plotting to take the throne. Cambyses' unstable behavior and his tyrannical treatment of his subjects began to erode his support among both the nobility and the common people. In 522 BCE, Cambyses' reign came to a sudden and unexpected end. On his return from a failed campaign in Ethiopia, where his army had suffered losses due to the harsh terrain and lack of supplies, Cambyses learned that a man named Gaumata had risen to power in Persia, claiming to be the deceased Smerdis. This usurper seized control of the empire, and Cambyses, realizing that his own reign was collapsing, either died by accident or committed suicide, though the exact circumstances of his death remain unclear. Cambyses' death led to a period of chaos and uncertainty. His empire, now under the control of the false Smerdis, was on the brink of collapse. But Cambyses' reign, despite its brevity and internal conflicts, had laid the groundwork for the future expansion and consolidation of the Persian Empire. Under his rule, the Persian Empire reached its zenith in terms of territorial size, stretching from the Greek cities in the west to the Indian subcontinent in the east. Cambyses' actions in Egypt and his attempts to extend Persian influence into Africa helped solidify the empire's position as a global power. However, his rule also demonstrated the dangers of overextension and the importance of effective leadership. His inability to manage both internal affairs and foreign campaigns created instability, which would take the next ruler, Darius I, to address and resolve. The conquest of Egypt, though a significant achievement, would also prove to be a source of long-term unrest. The harsh treatment of the Egyptian people and the failure to integrate them fully into the Persian Empire would lead to frequent revolts in the region. While Cambyses' military campaigns expanded the empire, His actions also set the stage for the eventual difficulties that Persia would face in holding such a vast and culturally diverse territory. Cambyses' reign, while marked by his achievements and the expansion of the Persian Empire, was also one of internal tension and instability. His reign underscored the challenges of maintaining control over a sprawling empire and the perils of neglecting local cultures and governance in favor of military conquest. In the end, Cambyses' inability to stabilize the empire after his military triumphs highlighted the need for strong leadership and effective administration, both of which would be addressed by his successor, Darius I. Cambyses II's military victories and the expansion of the Persian Empire were crucial for the continued growth of the Achaemenid dynasty. Yet his reign also foreshadowed the internal strife and the complex challenges of ruling such a vast empire. In the next chapter, we will see how Darius came to the throne and began the difficult task of restoring order and strengthening the foundations of the empire that Cambyses had set in motion. Section 5. Darius I, architect of Persian power, c. 522–486 BCE. After the tumultuous and short reign of Cambyses II, the Persian Empire was on the brink of collapse. The emergence of the false Smerdis, followed by the chaos of Cambyses' death, had left Persia vulnerable. The throne was claimed by an impostor, and the empire faced widespread instability. Yet it was in these dark days that one of Persia's greatest rulers, Darius I, would rise to power. Darius, whose full name was Darius the Great, came from the Persian aristocracy. He was not a direct descendant of Cyrus the Great, but rather a distant relative. He belonged to the Achaemenid royal family, and his rise to power was far from straightforward. Darius was one of the 7 noblemen who staged a coup against the false Smerdis Gaumata in 522 BCE. After their success, Darius declared himself king and began the task of consolidating power. His ascent was not without challenges. Many factions within the empire opposed him, and he had to fight off several rebellions to secure his reign. Darius's claim to the throne was initially questioned, especially given that the Persian people had been under the impression that Smerdis the impostor had been the legitimate successor. But Darius, known for his charisma and strategic mind, quickly won over the support of the military and the nobility. His first order of business was to restore order to a fragmented empire, and he did so with remarkable efficiency. One of Darius's first and most significant acts as king was the establishment of a more structured and effective government. He introduced a series of reforms that would transform the Persian Empire into one of the most efficient and enduring empires in history. His most notable contribution was the refinement and expansion of the satrapy system that Cyrus the Great had pioneered. Darius divided the empire into 20 provinces or satrapies, which were governed by local rulers known as satraps. This system allowed for greater local autonomy while maintaining central control. Darius's innovations didn't stop there. He introduced standardized taxation, creating a system where each satrapy paid a fixed amount to the royal treasury. This ensured the stability of Persian finances and reduced the financial strain that had plagued the empire under his predecessors. Darius's economic reforms were closely tied to his efforts to build infrastructure. One of his most ambitious projects was the construction of the Royal Road, a vast network of roads that spanned the entire empire from the western Anatolian coast to the eastern reaches of Persia. This road facilitated communication trade and the rapid movement of troops across the empire. The Royal Road, along with the introduction of a standardized currency, helped integrate the empire economically, allowing it to flourish as a center of trade and commerce. While Darius's internal reforms were crucial to the empire's stability, His military campaigns ensured that the Persian Empire would expand even further. Darius understood that military conquest was key to preserving the empire's power and influence. Under his rule, Persia expanded into new territories, including parts of India, Thrace, and the Caucasus region. One of Darius's most ambitious military campaigns was his invasion of Greece. He had been deeply offended by the Greek city-state's support of the Ionian Revolt in 499 BCE, a rebellion against Persian rule. Darius sought to punish the Greeks for their interference and to extend Persian influence in the region. In 492 BCE, he launched an invasion of Greece which culminated in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. At Marathon, Darius's forces faced the Athenians, who had been able to muster a surprisingly large and skilled army despite being vastly outnumbered. The Persian army, though formidable, was decisively defeated. The defeat at Marathon marked a significant setback for Darius's plans to conquer Greece, and it would later fuel the rise of Xerxes III, his son, who would attempt a second invasion of Greece. Despite the Greek setback, Darius's reign was marked by numerous successes on other fronts. He completed the conquest of Egypt, which had been initiated by Cambyses II, and solidified Persian control over the region. He also led successful campaigns in India, capturing territories along the Indus River and securing valuable trade routes. Darius's reign also witnessed the consolidation of Persian rule in the West, including the defeat of Thracian tribes and the extension of Persian influence into Macedon. Darius's military genius was not limited to expansion. He also worked hard to secure his empire's borders, fortifying key regions and ensuring that revolts were swiftly suppressed. His reign was characterized by a sophisticated intelligence network, which included spies who were stationed throughout the empire to monitor potential uprisings. This vigilance helped maintain Persian dominance and stability during his reign. Culturally, Darius encouraged the flourishing of Persian art, architecture, and religion. The construction of the grand capital city of Persepolis, which began during his reign, stands as a testament to his architectural ambitions. Persepolis became the symbolic heart of the Persian Empire, a place where the empire's wealth and power were on full display. The city's grand palaces, impressive sculptures, and stunning reliefs depicted the power of the Achaemenid dynasty and its divine right to rule. In terms of religion, Darius was a follower of Zoroastrianism, the ancient faith that had begun to spread throughout Persia. Zoroastrianism, with its emphasis on the duality of good and evil, influenced Darius's policies and his view of the world. Darius saw himself as a protector of the faith, and he worked to promote religious tolerance throughout the empire. He allowed his subjects to continue practicing their own religions as long as they recognized Persian rule. Despite his many achievements, Darius's reign was not without challenges. The Greek revolt, the internal rebellions, and the complex task of managing such a vast empire were constant sources of tension. Yet Darius's ability to consolidate power and expand the empire ensured that his reign would be remembered as one of the greatest in Persian history. Darius I's reign established the Achaemenid Empire as a global superpower with economic, military, and cultural influence stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indus River. His reforms laid the foundation for the empire's enduring strength, and his military campaigns ensured that Persia would remain a dominant force for centuries to come. Yet, as we will see in the next chapters, the empire's power would not last forever. The challenges of governing such a vast territory would eventually take their toll, leading to the decline of the empire in the coming generations. Section 6. The Persian Wars clash with Greece, c. 499 to 449 BCE. The Persian Empire, under the leadership of Darius I and his successors, was at the height of its power in the early 5th century BCE. However, this dominance was challenged by a rising power in the West, ancient Greece. The clash between the Persian Empire and the Greek city-states, often referred to as the Persian Wars, would have far-reaching consequences for both the Persian and Greek worlds. These wars, which lasted from 499 BCE to 449 BCE, were not just military conflicts, but cultural and ideological battles that shaped the future of the ancient world. The conflict between Persia and Greece had its roots in the Greek cities of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, which were under Persian control. In 499 BCE, these Greek cities, including Miletus and Ephesus, rebelled against Persian rule in what became known as the Ionian Revolt. The revolt was partly fueled by the Greeks' desire for independence and resentment of Persian taxes and military presence in the region. The Persian Empire, which was accustomed to suppressing uprisings, responded with military force, sending an army to crush the rebellion. The Ionian Revolt would have remained a localized conflict, but the involvement of the Greek city-state of Athens dramatically escalated the situation. Athens, motivated by both a sense of Greek solidarity and a desire to undermine Persian influence, sent ships and soldiers to support the Ionians. This support enraged the Persian king Darius I, who saw the Greeks' involvement as an affront to Persian power and authority. To punish the Greeks for their interference, Darius I decided to launch a full-scale invasion of Greece. His aim was not just to quash the rebellion, but to extend Persian influence throughout the Greek world. In 490 BCE, Darius sent a massive fleet to invade the Greek mainland. The Persian army landed at the Bay of Marathon, just northeast of Athens. The Greeks, led by the Athenians, quickly mobilized their forces to meet the threat. The Battle of Marathon, which took place in 490 BCE, became one of the most famous battles in ancient history. The Persian forces, though vast, were not as familiar with the terrain and had difficulty coordinating their forces. The Athenians, led by Miltiades, took advantage of this and launched a surprise attack, outflanking the Persian army. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the Greek hoplites' heavily armored infantry proved their superiority on the battlefield. The Persians were decisively defeated, and the Greek victory at Marathon became a symbol of the ability of small, unified city-states to stand against larger empires. The Persian defeat at Marathon was a significant blow to Darius's ambitions, but it did not mark the end of the conflict. Darius, humiliated by the loss, vowed to return and complete his conquest of Greece. However, before he could launch a second invasion, Darius died in 486 BCE and was succeeded by his son Xerxes I. Xerxes I inherited a vast empire, but he also inherited the challenge of subduing Greece, determined to avenge his father's defeat. Xerxes began preparations for a new invasion of Greece. This time, the Persian Empire would launch an invasion on a much larger scale. Xerxes amassed one of the largest armies in history, which, according to ancient sources, numbered in the hundreds of thousands. He also gathered a vast navy, intending to use it to blockade Greek ports and control the Aegean Sea. In 480 BCE, Xerxes crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait between Asia and Europe, with his army, and began his march toward Greece. The Greek city-states, realizing the scale of the Persian threat, formed an alliance under the leadership of Athens and Sparta. The Persian invasion was now a defining struggle between Eastern despotism and Western democracy. The first major clash between the Greeks and Persians occurred at the narrow pass of Thermopylae. Here, a small Greek force led by King Leonidas of Sparta held off the Persian army for several days. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the Greeks fought valiantly and inflicted heavy casualties on the Persian forces. The story of the 300 Spartans who made their last stand in defense of their homeland has become legendary. Although the Persians ultimately overcame the Greek defenders through treachery and sheer numbers, the battle became a symbol of Greek heroism and resistance. Meanwhile, the Greek navy, commanded by Themistocles, engaged the Persian fleet at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BCE. Themistocles had outwitted Xerxes by luring the Persian fleet into the narrow straits near the island of Salamis, where the Greeks had the advantage. The Persian navy, though larger, was unable to maneuver in the confined waters and was decisively defeated. The Greek victory at Salamis was a turning point in the war, as it crippled the Persian fleet and thwarted Xerxes' ambitions of naval domination. With the Persian forces reeling from their defeats at Thermopylae and Salamis, the Greeks launched a series of counterattacks. In 479 BCE, the combined Greek forces led by Sparta achieved another decisive victory at the Battle of Plataea. The Persian army, exhausted and demoralized, was finally defeated. The Greek victory at Plataea marked the end of Xerxes' invasion and the beginning of the decline of Persian influence in the Western Mediterranean. The Persian Wars, though costly for both sides, ended with a clear Greek victory. Persia's failure to conquer Greece had significant consequences. It marked the beginning of the decline of Persian expansion into the Western Mediterranean and the rise of Greek power, particularly in the form of Athens and Sparta. The war also cemented the Greek sense of identity and unity, laying the foundation for the Golden Age of Athens and the eventual rise of the Hellenistic world after Alexander the Great's conquests. For Persia, the defeat in the Persian Wars had long-term consequences. The loss of control over Greece weakened the empire's prestige and contributed to a gradual shift in power within the empire. Despite Xerxes' efforts to rebuild and consolidate his rule, the Persian Empire was no longer the uncontested superpower it had once been. Though the Persian Wars were a significant setback for the Achaemenid dynasty, the empire's internal strength and vast resources allowed it to survive for several more decades. The Persian Empire would continue to expand eastward and maintain its dominance in the east. However, the war with Greece had changed the course of history, marking the end of Persia's attempts to expand further into Europe and the beginning of a new chapter for both Persia and Greece. Section 7. The Golden Age: Cultural Flourishing and Prosperity, 500–400 BCE. After the turbulent and costly Persian Wars, the Achaemenid Empire entered a period of relative peace and prosperity. Under the rule of Xerxes and his successors, the Persian Empire began to recover from the setbacks of the Greek conflict. Despite the defeat in Greece, Persia maintained its vast holdings, and the empire experienced a cultural and economic flourishing that would leave a lasting impact on the ancient world. This period, often referred to as the Golden Age of the Persian Empire, witnessed significant developments in governance, infrastructure, art, and trade. The Achaemenid rulers, particularly Darius the Great and his son Xerxes, focused on strengthening the internal structure of the empire and ensuring its economic stability. It was during this time that the Persian Empire, at its peak, became a hub of commerce and culture, attracting traders, artists, and intellectuals from across the known world. Economic prosperity and trade networks. A critical factor in the empire's golden age was its booming economy. The Persian Empire's vast territorial expanse provided it with access to a wide variety of resources: gold, silver, grain, and luxury goods, facilitating trade on an unprecedented scale. Darius I's reforms, including standardized taxation and the introduction of a unified currency, were instrumental in stabilizing the economy and encouraging trade across the empire's vast regions. These reforms helped create an efficient and interconnected system of tribute and taxation, making it possible for the empire to fund large-scale infrastructure projects, military campaigns, and the royal court's lavish expenses. The introduction of the daric, a gold coin, became a symbol of the empire's economic power. The Daric was widely used across the empire from the Persian heartlands to the distant reaches of India, facilitating trade between regions. The Persian Empire's wealth, bolstered by the influx of goods from various regions, allowed it to build the infrastructure that supported trade across vast distances. One of the most significant projects of this period was the expansion of the Royal Road, a massive network of roads that connected the empire from its heart in Persepolis to its farthest reaches. Stretching over 1,600 miles from Susa in the east to Sardis in the west, the Royal Road made it easier for goods and messages to travel quickly across the empire. The road allowed merchants to move goods like spices, textiles, and precious metals, while also facilitating the movement of troops and government officials. The Royal Road was a vital artery of the Persian Empire's trade network, making the empire a central player in ancient global commerce. Art, architecture, and culture. Culturally, the Persian Empire experienced a period of remarkable artistic and architectural achievements. Under the Achaemenid rulers, the empire became a melting pot of diverse cultures, blending Persian traditions with the rich artistic styles of the Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, and others. The Persian kings, especially Darius I, recognized the importance of promoting the arts as a way of solidifying their power and legitimizing their rule. One of the most enduring symbols of the Persian Empire's grandeur is the city of Persepolis. Founded by Darius I around 518 BCE, Persepolis became the ceremonial capital of the empire, a stunning architectural marvel designed to showcase Persian power and culture. The city was strategically located at the foot of the Zagros Mountains, symbolizing the connection between the Persian heartland and the distant reaches of the empire. Persepolis was home to magnificent palaces, grand stairways, and intricate carvings that depicted the Persian kings in their full glory. The site also featured colossal halls where the king would receive ambassadors and conduct state affairs. The reliefs that adorned Persepolis provided a visual history of the Persian king's military victories, royal processions, and diplomatic engagements with other cultures. These carvings were not merely decorative. They also served as a propaganda tool, reinforcing the divine right of the king and the greatness of the Persian Empire. In addition to architecture, Persian art during this period flourished in other forms, including sculpture, pottery, and jewelry. Persian craftsmen were renowned for their ability to work with precious metals, creating intricate gold and silver artifacts. The artistic legacy of the Achaemenid Empire was not confined to Persia alone. It spread across the empire, influencing the art and culture of surrounding regions, religious tolerance, and diversity. Another defining feature of the Achaemenid Empire during its golden age was its policy of religious tolerance. While the Persian kings were adherents of Zoroastrianism, they allowed their subjects to practice their own religions freely, as long as they did not threaten the stability of the empire. This policy of religious pluralism was one of the factors that contributed to the empire's stability and its ability to manage a vast and culturally diverse population. Zoroastrianism, the state religion of Persia, was founded by the prophet Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, around the 6th century BCE. The religion focused on the duality of good and evil and emphasized the worship of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god. Zoroastrianism was an important part of the cultural identity of the Achaemenid rulers, and they often used religious symbolism to justify their authority. However, the Persian kings were not oppressive in their promotion of Zoroastrianism. Instead, they allowed a variety of religious practices to thrive throughout the empire, which included the worship of gods from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even Greece. This policy of religious tolerance was particularly significant in regions like Babylon, where the Persians allowed the local people to continue practicing their ancient religious traditions. It also helped to foster a sense of unity among the empire's diverse peoples. In Egypt, for example, the Persians allowed the local priesthood to maintain their influence, which helped keep the peace in a region known for its strong sense of identity and independence. Cultural exchanges and diplomatic relations. The Persian Empire's golden age also saw an expansion of cultural exchanges with other civilizations. As a result of the empire's vast territorial expanse, the Achaemenid kings were able to engage in diplomacy with other great powers of the ancient world, such as Egypt, Greece, and India. These exchanges fostered the flow of ideas, technology, and culture between East and West. One of the most remarkable examples of such exchanges was the diplomatic relations between Persia and India. The Persians were highly influenced by Indian culture, particularly in the realms of religion and philosophy. Zoroastrianism shared similarities with some of the religious practices found in India, and the Persian court was open to Indian ideas about governance and ethics. Persian traders also played a significant role in facilitating the spread of Indian goods, such as cotton spices and textiles, throughout the empire. In the West, the Persians maintained diplomatic relations with the Greek city-states. Though the Persian Wars had soured relations between Persia and Greece, the two civilizations continued to interact through trade and diplomacy. Persian ambassadors visited Greek cities, and Greek philosophers and intellectuals made their way to the Persian court, where they were often treated with respect. The Persian Empire's golden age was a time of immense cultural flourishing, both within the empire and in its interactions with neighboring civilizations. Persia's wealth, military power, and commitment to cultural exchange allowed it to become a center of art, trade, and intellectual activity. The empire's prosperity, underpinned by its economic and administrative reforms, helped to create an environment where culture and commerce could thrive, leaving a legacy that would influence the world for centuries to come. Yet, as we will explore in the following chapters, this period of prosperity was not to last forever. Despite its vast wealth and cultural achievements, the empire would face new challenges, both internal and external, that would eventually lead to its decline. Section 8. Xerxes was the high tide and its setbacks, c. 486–465 BCE. When Xerxes ascended to the throne in 486 BCE, he inherited the vast and powerful Persian Empire, built by his father, Darius I. Xerxes was the son of Darius and Queen Atossa, the daughter of Cyrus the Great, placing him firmly in the royal lineage. His reign, however, would prove to be a turning point for the Achaemenid dynasty, marking both the peak of the empire's power and the beginning of its long, slow decline. Xerxes was an ambitious ruler, determined to avenge the Persian defeat at the Battle of Marathon and to continue his father's policies of conquest. His most famous and most costly military campaign was his invasion of Greece, which would forever alter the course of Persian and Greek history. The invasion of Greece in 480 BCE, Xerxes set out to fulfill his father's dream of expanding Persian power into Europe. His invasion of Greece was massive, both in terms of the size of the army and the ambition behind it. Xerxes gathered an enormous force, reportedly numbering over 1 million men, though this number is likely exaggerated by ancient sources. This force included not only Persian soldiers, but also troops from the many subject peoples of the empire, ranging from Egyptians to Indians, from Scythians to Babylonians. The Persian king also assembled a fleet of ships to complement his army, giving him the ability to fight on both land and sea. The Persian strategy was clear: to crush the Greek city-states under a single overwhelming force and bring them into the fold of the Persian Empire. Xerxes' army crossed the Hellespont, an important narrow strait that separated Asia from Europe, in a dramatic display of Persian might. He famously had a bridge of boats built to carry his army across the water, which was later destroyed by the Greeks as they fought to repel the invaders. Despite the initial momentum, the Persian campaign faced significant challenges. The Greek city-states, despite their lack of unity, were determined to defend their homeland. Sparta, Athens, and their allies formed a military alliance to resist the Persian invasion. Two major battles would define this struggle: the Battle of Thermopylae and the Battle of Salamis. At Thermopylae, the Persian forces clashed with a small Greek army led by King Leonidas of Sparta. Although the Greeks fought valiantly, their numbers were simply too few to withstand the might of Xerxes' forces. The famous stand of the 300 Spartans and their allies became legendary, but it was ultimately a defeat for the Greeks. Despite this, the battle delayed the Persian advance long enough for the other Greek city-states to prepare for the next phase of the conflict. The true turning point came at the Battle of Salamis, fought later in 480 BCE. Here, the Persian navy met the Greek fleet in the narrow straits near the island of Salamis. The Greeks, led by Themistocles of Athens, outmaneuvered the much larger Persian fleet. Using the terrain to their advantage, the Greeks destroyed a large portion of Xerxes' navy. The loss at Salamis was devastating for the Persian campaign, as it crippled the Persian navy and disrupted Xerxes' plans for further conquest. After the defeats at Thermopylae and Salamis, Xerxes retreated to Persia, leaving his general Mardonius to continue the campaign in Greece. However, the Persian forces were finally crushed at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE, marking the end of the Persian invasion of Greece. The Greeks, despite their differences, had succeeded in pushing back the Persian threat. Xerxes' failure to conquer Greece was a monumental setback for the Persian Empire, as it signaled the decline of Persian influence in the Western Mediterranean. Internal reforms and cultural flourishing. While Xerxes' reign is most often associated with his failed invasion of Greece, he also focused on strengthening the internal structure of the Persian Empire. He continued his father's policies of centralized control and administration, overseeing the continued expansion of the satrapy system. He worked to improve the empire's infrastructure, maintaining the royal road and facilitating trade across his vast empire. Additionally, Xerxes sought to promote Zoroastrianism as the state religion and worked to reinforce the cultural unity of the Persian people. Xerxes' reign also saw a continuation of the monumental architectural projects that had begun under his father. The king made significant contributions to the construction of Persepolis, including the completion of grand palaces and ceremonial halls. Persepolis, the capital city of the Achaemenid Empire, became a symbol of Persian power and splendor. Xerxes' building projects, which included the Hall of 100 Columns, helped reinforce the image of the king as both a military leader and a patron of culture. Despite these efforts at consolidation, Xerxes' failure in Greece had a lasting impact on the empire. His retreat from Greece not only damaged Persian prestige, but also diverted valuable resources and attention from internal affairs. His loss to the Greeks weakened the empire's influence over the Greek world, and it became clear that Persian expansion into Europe was no longer a viable option. The decline of Xerxes' reign. The latter years of Xerxes' reign were marked by increasing instability within the empire. While the Persian kings had always relied on the loyalty of their satraps, Xerxes' reign saw growing dissatisfaction among local rulers. His heavy-handed approach to governance, coupled with the drain of resources caused by the failed Greek campaign, created discontent within the empire's borders. Xerxes also faced internal challenges from his own family. The political intrigues at the Persian court grew, and it is said that Xerxes became increasingly paranoid about threats to his throne. The king's paranoia culminated in the assassination of his trusted advisor, Artabanus, and the execution of many other prominent court figures. Xerxes' later years were characterized by attempts to restore order, but by this time the empire had already begun its slow decline. Although his successors would continue to rule the Persian Empire for several more decades, the setbacks suffered during Xerxes' reign marked a turning point. The empire's military focus on expanding into Europe had failed, and internal dissension began to erode the stability that had once characterized the Achaemenid dynasty. Xerxes' reign, with its military ambitions and internal struggles, offers a complex picture of an empire at its zenith, but also beginning to falter. His military failures in Greece not only marked a loss of territory, but also signaled a shift in the balance of power in the ancient world. Greece, despite its smaller size and fragmented political structure, had managed to push back the might of Persia, marking the beginning of a new era in the Mediterranean. The failure of Xerxes to bring the Greek world under Persian control would reverberate for generations. As we move forward in our story, we'll explore how the Persian Empire, despite these setbacks, continued to dominate much of the ancient world until the eventual challenges posed by Alexander the Great. Section 9. Decline in power. Internal struggles and distant conquests. By the end of Xerxes I's reign in 465 BCE, the Persian Empire, though still vast and powerful, was beginning to show signs of decline. Despite its massive territorial expanse and the political stability that had characterized earlier years, the empire was increasingly plagued by internal divisions, economic strains, and military overextension. The once strong central authority of the Achaemenid rulers began to weaken, leading to a series of challenges that would mark the final stages of the empire's greatness. One of the main factors in the gradual decline of the empire was the erosion of the political cohesion that had sustained the Achaemenid dynasty in its early years. The Persian kings, especially after Xerxes III, became more vulnerable to internal dissent and power struggles within the royal court. Political intrigue, court conspiracies, and revolts from the empire's satraps were growing issues. The satraps, or provincial governors who had once been loyal to the king and the central administration, began to assert their own power, sometimes acting as virtual independent rulers. They were often motivated by personal ambition, and in some cases, they openly rebelled against the royal authority, exacerbating the empire's instability. In addition to these internal political struggles, the Persian Empire was also increasingly burdened by economic difficulties. The costs of maintaining such a vast empire which spanned 3 continents had become unsustainable. The empire's reliance on tribute from its satrapies, though initially successful, led to financial strain as the demands on these regions increased. Economic resources were being drained by costly military campaigns, especially those on the empire's borders, where rebellious provinces and distant conquests required large standing armies to maintain control. The Persian military, once a symbol of unmatched power, also began to experience difficulties. As the empire expanded further east and west, its military stretched thin, making it difficult to defend all of its frontiers. The empire's vast size, once an asset, now became a disadvantage, as the logistical challenges of maintaining such a large force in distant regions proved increasingly difficult. Moreover, the Persian army, while still formidable, faced growing competition from other emerging powers, including the Greeks and the Macedonians. The internal strife and external challenges that marked the final decades of the Persian Empire's reign were exemplified by the reigns of several kings following Xerxes. His son Artaxerxes I ruled 465 to 424 BCE, faced numerous rebellions in the empire's provinces, most notably in Egypt. The Egyptians, having been conquered by Persia in 525 BCE, had long resented Persian rule, and during Artaxerxes' reign they managed to rebel and briefly regain their independence. Though the Persians eventually subdued the revolt, the cost of the war in Egypt drained resources from the central administration. Artaxerxes I also struggled with internal challenges at home. His reign was marked by frequent disputes within the royal court and the increasing influence of powerful factions. One of the most notorious events during his rule was the assassination of the powerful court official Artabanus, who had previously been one of the king's trusted advisors. Such events of court intrigue, along with growing dissatisfaction among the satraps, undermined the stability of the empire. Artaxerxes' reign, while characterized by attempts to restore stability, also witnessed a decline in the effectiveness of the Persian monarchy and the gradual fragmentation of royal power. The rise of the Greek city-states and the Persian response. While the Persian Empire struggled with internal dissension and military overextension, Greece was experiencing a period of remarkable growth. After their victory in the Persian Wars, the Greek city-states, particularly Athens, rose to prominence, establishing themselves as centers of culture, power, and influence in the Mediterranean world. This shift in power did not go unnoticed by the Persians, who continued to harbor ambitions of restoring their control over Greece. The Achaemenid rulers, particularly Darius I and Xerxes III, had long viewed Greece as a rival and sought to expand Persian influence in the region. However, the defeat in the Persian Wars had made it clear that conquering Greece was no longer a viable objective. Nevertheless, the Greeks' continued success, especially Athens' rise as a major naval power, remained a concern for the Persian Empire. In response to these challenges, the Persians attempted to strengthen their influence over the Greek world through diplomacy, alliances, and at times, covert interference. During the 5th century BCE, the Persian court made efforts to foster divisions among the Greek city-states, particularly between Athens and Sparta, in an attempt to weaken the Greek alliance. However, these efforts were largely unsuccessful, and the Greeks continued to strengthen their unity, eventually culminating in the rise of Alexander the Great, whose conquests would forever alter the fate of the Persian Empire. While Persia faced mounting internal difficulties, Greece's growing power represented an emerging threat. The combination of the internal unrest within Persia and the external rise of Greece contributed to the sense that the empire was in decline. As Persia struggled to maintain its grasp on the Western Mediterranean, its focus shifted increasingly to the east, where it faced new challenges from the growing power of India and Central Asia. The declining power of the Persian military. As we move into the later years of the Achaemenid dynasty, one of the most significant factors in the decline of the Persian Empire was the deterioration of its military might. The Persian military, once a formidable force under Cyrus and Darius I, began to lose its edge as the empire expanded further and internal divisions took root. The Persian army, made up of elite units such as the Immortals, was highly skilled and disciplined in its early years. However, as the empire expanded, the military's cohesion began to break down. The introduction of new military strategies by rivals such as the Greeks and the Macedonians outpaced Persia's ability to adapt. The Persian military was still strong, but it lacked the flexibility and innovation that its enemies increasingly possessed. In addition to this, the Persian military was burdened by the logistical challenges of controlling an empire that spanned 3 continents. The need to station large armies at the empire's many borders from Egypt to India strained the military's resources. This strain was felt most acutely in the empire's eastern frontiers, where nomadic tribes and smaller kingdoms proved difficult to subdue. The Persian military's inability to adapt to changing warfare tactics and its growing vulnerability to rebellion within its borders would come to a head in the 4th century BCE. By then, Persia had been significantly weakened by internal instability, economic strain, and military defeats. The empire's once unstoppable military power was no longer the force it had been under Cyrus and Darius, setting the stage for the dramatic events to come. Section 10. Artaxerxes was efforts to stabilize and the long-standing decline, 465 to 424 BCE. Artaxerxes I, the son of Xerxes. I ascended to the Persian throne in 465 BCE, after the assassination of his father. His reign, which lasted until 424 BCE, marked a period of attempted stability and consolidation following the traumatic failures of Xerxes' military campaigns in Greece. Yet despite Artaxerxes' efforts to restore Persia's former glory, his reign would also highlight the deepening fractures within the empire that would ultimately lead to its decline. The political landscape. Artaxerxes inherited an empire that, though still vast, was deeply weakened by both internal strife and external threats. Unlike his predecessors, Artaxerxes was not a warrior king. Instead, he was more of a diplomat and administrator, trying to secure peace within the empire through strategic political decisions. His reign was shaped by the influence of powerful court officials such as the commander-in-chief, the general Megabyzus, and his own family members. One of Artaxerxes' first major challenges was to stabilize his rule after the assassination of his father. Xerxes' reign had ended in controversy and turmoil, and Artaxerxes' rise to power was not universally accepted. To solidify his position, Artaxerxes faced immediate uprisings within the empire, including a rebellion in Egypt, where the Egyptians sought to regain their independence after Persia's conquest of the region. Artaxerxes quickly moved to suppress these revolts, using both military force and diplomatic efforts to regain control. Although Artaxerxes was able to quell some of the rebellion, his reign was marked by a growing sense of instability at the core of the Persian Empire. The satraps or regional governors continued to amass power, often acting independently and undermining central authority. Internal revolts became more frequent, particularly in the empire's western and eastern provinces, where the control of the Persian central government had always been tenuous. The battle for Egypt and the continued challenges of distant conquests. Artaxerxes faced repeated revolts in Egypt throughout his reign, but the most significant of these occurred early in his rule around 460 BCE. Egypt, a wealthy and strategically vital region for the Persian Empire, had long been a source of tension. The Persian Empire's methods of governance in Egypt had alienated many of the native Egyptians, and local elites had continuously sought to reclaim their autonomy. In 460 BCE, a major revolt broke out in Egypt, and Artaxerxes was forced to send a massive army to restore order. While the Persians ultimately retook Egypt, the prolonged conflict drained the empire's resources. The repeated revolts in Egypt highlighted a growing trend in the Achaemenid Empire. Its military and financial resources were being stretched thin by the numerous rebellions within its vast borders. Egypt, in particular, was becoming increasingly difficult to control, and Artaxerxes was unable to maintain long-term stability in the region. In addition to the issues in Egypt, Artaxerxes also faced military challenges on the eastern frontiers of the empire, where nomadic tribes and rebellious satraps continued to cause trouble. The inability to effectively manage these distant territories signaled a deeper issue for the Persian Empire. It had become too large and complex to govern effectively. The Achaemenid Empire, once unified and efficient under rulers like Cyrus the Great and Darius I, was now being strained by internal conflicts and external challenges. Cultural and religious policies. Despite these internal difficulties, Artaxerxes did attempt to bolster the empire's unity through cultural and religious policies. Much like his ancestors, Artaxerxes was a devout follower of Zoroastrianism, which had become the state religion of Persia. Zoroastrianism, with its emphasis on the duality of good and evil, and the worship of Ahura Mazda, served as both a spiritual guide and a political tool for the Persian kings. Artaxerxes promoted Zoroastrianism as a means to unify the diverse peoples of the empire under a common religious framework, although he also allowed religious pluralism, as had been the case under Cyrus the Great. Artaxerxes also focused on infrastructure and construction projects within the empire, including the renovation of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid dynasty. These efforts aimed to reinforce the empire's power and grandeur. Despite the growing instability within the empire, Artaxerxes understood that maintaining the image of Persian superiority was essential to his rule, and the grand architectural projects were a key part of this effort. Internal struggles and the decline of the royal authority. However, despite these efforts, Artaxerxes' reign continued to highlight the weakening of the central authority of the Persian kings. As the satraps grew in power and influence, they began to challenge the king's ability to rule effectively. These regional governors who controlled vast territories and resources often acted with increasing independence, undermining the cohesion of the empire. Their growing autonomy threatened the delicate balance of power within the Achaemenid system, which had been so successful in the earlier years of the empire. This internal fragmentation was most evident in the royal court, where political infighting and factionalism became widespread. Artaxerxes struggled to maintain control over his advisors and family members, many of whom sought to further their own interests rather than support the central authority of the king. These court intrigues only added to the growing instability within the empire. The Persian Empire's inability to cope with these internal challenges was one of the most significant factors contributing to its eventual decline. The once centralized power that had characterized the Achaemenid dynasty under Cyrus the Great and Darius the Thirst was now being eroded by corruption, disunity, and the unchecked power of local rulers, the legacy of Artaxerxes. Despite the political and military struggles during his reign, Artaxerxes Thestor's legacy was not entirely negative. His efforts to maintain the empire and restore stability through diplomacy, construction, and religious policies helped to preserve the Persian state for several decades. However, the cracks that began to appear during his reign would continue to widen in the years to come, as the empire's resources became increasingly overstretched. Artaxerxes' reign is often seen as a transitional period, marking the end of the era of powerful Achaemenid rulers and the beginning of the slow, inexorable decline of the Persian Empire. His reign highlighted the fragility of the empire as it struggled to balance internal stability with external pressures. The decline of royal authority, the growing power of the satraps, and the inability to manage distant provinces would ultimately set the stage for the empire's collapse in the following century. As we move forward, we will see how the Persian Empire, despite its enduring strength and immense resources, began to face challenges from within and from new external threats. The cracks in the Achaemenid system would widen further, and by the time of Darius III, the empire was on the brink of collapse, paving the way for a new force to rise, one that would change the course of history. Section 11. The Rise of Alexander the Great, Persia's Greatest Threat. 334 BCE. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, once a superpower that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus River, was now facing its greatest threat. The centuries of stability and growth under Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes were a distant memory. Internal instability, economic strain, and the growing power of regional governors had severely weakened the empire. Yet the final blow would come not from within, but from a brilliant and ambitious young conqueror, from the Greek city-state of Macedon, Alexander the Great. Born in 356 BCE to King Philip II of Macedon, Alexander was raised in a world of military strategy and political intrigue. His father, a formidable ruler, had already begun the process of uniting the Greek states under Macedonian leadership. Alexander's education, overseen by the philosopher Aristotle, instilled in him a deep appreciation for Greek culture and philosophy, but also a belief in his own destiny to lead and conquer. By the time Alexander ascended the throne in 336 BCE, following the assassination of his father, he had already been groomed for greatness. At just 20 years old, Alexander inherited a well-trained army and a united Greek kingdom. His ambitions, however, reached far beyond the borders of Greece. Alexander's dream was not just to conquer the Greek world, but to challenge the greatest empire the world had ever known, Persia. The Persian Empire, now under the rule of Darius III, was in a state of disarray. Although it still controlled vast territories, its power was eroding. Darius III, a weak and indecisive ruler, lacked the leadership qualities of his predecessors. While he inherited an empire stretching from Egypt to the borders of India, the once formidable Persian military was in decline. The empire's internal divisions, along with increasing external pressure from the growing Greek threat, had left Persia vulnerable. The invasion begins crossing into Asia Minor 334 BCE. In 334 BCE, Alexander launched his campaign to bring down the Persian Empire. His first major victory came at the Battle of Granicus, fought near the river of the same name in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Alexander's army, though significantly smaller than the Persian forces, was highly disciplined and well-coordinated. The battle, though fiercely contested, ended in a decisive Macedonian victory, giving Alexander a foothold in Asia Minor and demonstrating his military genius. Following the Battle of Granicus, Alexander continued his campaign southward, securing the coastal cities of Asia Minor. As he marched, he sought to win the support of the local populations, offering liberation from Persian rule. His rhetoric of freedom and his ability to present himself as a liberator resonated with many people under Persian control. Despite this, he encountered fierce resistance, especially from Persian satraps and local forces loyal to Darius III. Alexander's tactics were not just military, but psychological. He had studied the history of the Persian Empire and understood the importance of controlling key cities and symbols of power. As he advanced, he captured strategic cities such as Sardis and Ephesus, weakening the Persian grip on the western provinces. These victories, along with his appeal to the peoples of Asia Minor, began to sow doubt within the Persian Empire about the strength of their rule. The Battle of Issus, a defining moment. As Alexander's forces moved south through Asia Minor, they encountered Darius III in 333 BCE at the Battle of Issus near the Mediterranean coast. The battle marked a defining moment in the clash between Macedon and Persia, as Alexander decisively defeated Darius's much larger army. Though Darius's forces outnumbered the Macedonians, Alexander's brilliant military tactics once again proved superior. Using the terrain to his advantage and executing a surprise attack, Alexander shattered the Persian lines. The Battle of Issus was a crushing defeat for Darius both militarily and symbolically. In the aftermath of the battle, Darius fled, leaving his army in disarray. Alexander, having secured a decisive victory, now controlled a large portion of Asia Minor and the key cities along the eastern Mediterranean. The victory also opened the doors for further expansion into Syria, Phoenicia, and Egypt. However, the most significant result of the Battle of Issus was the capture of Darius's family. Darius's wife, mother, and children were taken prisoner by Alexander. Instead of executing them or using them as mere pawns, Alexander treated them with respect and offered them luxurious accommodations. This act of clemency contrasted sharply with the often brutal tactics of other conquerors and helped cement his reputation as a ruler who sought to unite rather than destroy the regions he conquered. Alexander in Egypt and the founding of Alexandria. After his success at Issus, Alexander turned his attention to Egypt, which was under Persian control. Egypt, with its rich history and strategic importance, was a key target for Alexander's campaign. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, welcomed Alexander as a liberator. The Persian garrison in Egypt offered little resistance, and Alexander entered the city of Memphis in 332 BCE. In Egypt, Alexander's military genius and diplomatic tact continued to serve him well. He was declared pharaoh and embraced the title, aligning himself with the divine kingship of Egypt's ancient traditions. One of Alexander's most important achievements in Egypt was the founding of the city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast. The city was designed to be a center of learning, culture, and commerce blending Greek and Egyptian traditions. Alexandria would go on to become one of the most important cities of the ancient world, attracting scholars, philosophers, and traders from across the Mediterranean. Alexander's time in Egypt was marked by religious symbolism as he was revered not just as a conqueror, but as a god-king. He visited the oracle of Amun at Siwa, where he was declared the son of Zeus Ammon. This divine claim solidified Alexander's image as a ruler chosen by the gods, further enhancing his appeal and legitimacy. The Battle of Gaugamela. The end of the Persian Empire. Despite his victories in the West and Egypt, Alexander's primary goal was to defeat Darius III and bring down the Persian Empire once and for all. The final confrontation came in 331 BCE at the Battle of Gaugamela near present-day Iraq. This battle would decide the fate of the Persian Empire. Once again, Darius assembled a massive army reportedly numbering over 100,000 soldiers. The Persian forces, although larger than Alexander's, were not as unified or strategically sound. Alexander, with his characteristic precision and battlefield acumen, outflanked Darius's army and attacked at the opportune moment. The battle was a resounding victory for the Macedonians, and Darius once again fled, leaving his army and empire behind. The victory at Gaugamela was the final blow to the Achaemenid Persian Empire. With Darius fleeing, the remaining Persian resistance quickly collapsed. Alexander marched into Babylon, the heart of the Persian Empire, and claimed it as his own. The fall of Babylon marked the end of the Persian Empire, which had dominated the ancient world for over 2 centuries. The death of Darius III and the end of the Achaemenid dynasty. Darius III's death, which occurred shortly after the Battle of Gaugamela, marked the final end of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. In a desperate attempt to rally support, Darius had fled to the eastern provinces of his empire, but he was betrayed by his own satraps. His murder, likely orchestrated by Bessus, a Persian nobleman, sealed the fate of the empire. Alexander, now master of the Persian Empire, set his sights on further conquests. But the collapse of the Achaemenid dynasty had profound implications. The Persian Empire, once a global superpower, had fallen in a matter of years. The rise of Alexander the Great, with his exceptional military genius and vision for a united Mediterranean world, had forever changed the course of history. As we move into the next chapters, we will explore how Alexander's conquest of Persia led to the spread of Greek culture throughout the known world, and how the legacy of the Achaemenid Empire would continue to influence the regions it once ruled, even after its fall. Section 12. The Fall of Persepolis. Symbol of Persia's demise, 330 BCE. With the Persian Empire now defeated, the fall of its greatest symbol, Persepolis, was an inevitable yet profoundly symbolic event. Persepolis had been the royal capital of the Achaemenid Empire, a city designed to reflect the grandeur and divine legitimacy of the Persian kings. Founded by Darius the Great 518 BCE, Persepolis was a monumental achievement of Persian architecture, culture, and royal power. It was a city of awe-inspiring palaces, monumental staircases, intricate carvings, and grand reception halls, all built to display the might and glory of the Achaemenid dynasty. When Alexander the Great marched into Persia and defeated Darius III at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE, he set his sights on the empire's heart, Persepolis. After Darius's death and the collapse of the Persian monarchy, Alexander's forces entered the city in 330 BCE. What followed was one of the most dramatic and controversial moments in Alexander's conquest. Persepolis, having once symbolized the might of the Persian kings, now stood as a symbol of Persian defeat. But Alexander did not immediately destroy it. Upon entering the city, he reportedly made plans to honor the ancient city, perhaps in recognition of its historical and cultural significance. However, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The exact reasons for the destruction of Persepolis are still debated by historians, but several key factors contribute to our understanding of why the city was ultimately razed. The cultural and symbolic destruction of Persepolis. The most immediate reason for the fall of Persepolis was the aftermath of a drunken feast. According to ancient sources, including Plutarch, a Macedonian officer named Memnon of Rhodes instigated a fire that ultimately consumed the city. This fire, whether sparked by the actions of soldiers or by Alexander's enemies seeking to disgrace him, spread through the palaces and halls of Persepolis, leaving much of the city in ruins. While the exact motivations behind this destruction are unclear, there are several theories. Some historians suggest that Alexander's decision to destroy Persepolis was an act of revenge for the Persian invasions of Greece, particularly the destruction of Athens and the burning of the Acropolis. The fire at Persepolis, therefore, may have been an act of symbolic retribution meant to cleanse the city of its associations with Persian imperialism. Alexander perhaps saw the destruction of the city as a way to fully break from the past and assert his own dominance. Additionally, the destruction of Persepolis can be seen as a political act. By leveling the royal capital, Alexander sent a clear message to the Persian people and to the conquered territories: there was no turning back. The fall of Persepolis was the death knell for the Achaemenid dynasty, signaling that the Persian Empire had been definitively overthrown and that a new era led by Alexander was beginning. Despite the fire, some portions of the city were spared, and Alexander's army took many of the treasures and artifacts back to Macedon. The iconic Persian palaces, including the Grand Apadana Palace, were gutted, and the treasure rooms once filled with riches from across the empire were looted. Yet while Alexander's soldiers dismantled Persepolis's treasures and left the city in ruins, they did not destroy everything. Much of the city's grand architecture and artwork, such as the famous friezes and bas-reliefs, would eventually be uncovered centuries later, serving as a reminder of the grandeur and eventual destruction of the Achaemenid Empire. The psychological impact of the fall of Persepolis. The fall of Persepolis marked the symbolic end of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, but it also highlighted the rapid nature of Alexander's conquests. In just a few short years, the empire that had once spanned 3 continents from Egypt to India had crumbled under the weight of a single man's ambition. For the Persians, the loss of Persepolis was not merely the loss of a city, but the loss of an entire cultural and political identity. Persepolis was the city where Persian kings hosted grand ceremonies, where tribute was collected from the farthest reaches of the empire, and where the empire's power was most visibly displayed. The destruction of this city symbolized the obliteration of the Achaemenid dynasty, and it sent a message across the ancient world that the might of the Persian Empire, long considered invincible, had been shattered by a young Greek king. For Alexander, however, the destruction of Persepolis was a necessary step in asserting his dominance over the conquered Persian territories. While he may have spared some elements of the city out of respect for its grandeur, his primary goal was to demonstrate that Persia's former rulers and their empire were no more. By removing the city's power and prestige, Alexander sought to erase the memory of Persian grandeur and replace it with his own legacy. The fate of the Persian Empire's remaining territories. After the fall of Persepolis, Alexander's forces continued to push further into the remaining Persian heartlands. The collapse of the Persian military alongside the murder of Darius III left the empire without a strong central figure to rally around. The remnants of the Persian state were quickly absorbed into Alexander's rapidly expanding kingdom. Despite these swift conquests, Alexander's reign was not without challenges. Resistance from local satraps and regional leaders continued in some parts of the empire, particularly in the eastern territories. The Persians may have lost their capital, but they still held on to parts of the empire, including Bactria and the western provinces of India. Nevertheless, the death of Darius III and the fall of Persepolis signaled the end of the Achaemenid dynasty's control over the vast empire it had built. The symbolic and physical destruction of Persepolis also heralded the beginning of the Hellenistic period. After Alexander's conquest, Greek culture and ideas began to spread across the vast regions of the former Persian Empire. In the centuries that followed, Alexander's successors, the Diadochi, would establish their own kingdoms in the Persian heartland, blending Greek and Persian culture in a new era of cross-cultural exchange. The legacy of Persepolis. Though Persepolis was destroyed, its legacy endured through the centuries. Archaeologists and historians have unearthed the ruins of Persepolis, revealing the grandeur of the city and the cultural exchange that took place within its walls. The friezes and bas-reliefs that decorated Persepolis still provide a window into the Achaemenid era, offering insight into Persian religion, politics, and royal life. The fall of Persepolis marked the end of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, but it did not erase the cultural and political influence of Persia. Persian traditions, art, and architecture influenced the subsequent empires that rose in the region, including the Seleucid Empire and the Parthian Empire. Even after Alexander's death, Persian culture continued to shape the development of the Middle East, blending with Greek influences in the Hellenistic world. In a way, the destruction of Persepolis served as both a physical and cultural marker of the passing of an era. It represented the end of Persia's dominance and the rise of new empires and ideas. Yet even as the city was reduced to rubble, the memory of the Achaemenid Empire lived on, embedded in the legacy of Persepolis itself. Section 13. The end of the Achaemenid Empire. Death of Darius III, 330 BCE. The final chapter of the Achaemenid Persian Empire came swiftly and decisively, marked by the death of its last king, Darius III, in 330 BCE. His reign, which had been fraught with internal chaos and external threats, was marked by the rapid collapse of the once mighty empire. The Persian Empire, after over 2 centuries of domination, was dismantled by the military genius of Alexander the Great, who had already proven his prowess in previous battles against Persian forces. But it was the events surrounding Darius III's death that truly sealed the fate of the Achaemenid dynasty. Darius III's rise to power, Darius III's ascension to the Persian throne, was a result of the empire's continued instability. After the tumultuous reigns of Xerxes and Artaxerxes I, both of whom struggled with internal revolts and external pressures, the Persian royal family found itself fractured. Darius III, originally named Kodomanus, was not a natural-born heir, but a nobleman who had seized the throne through a combination of political maneuvering and military support. His rise came after the assassination of the previous king Artaxerxes III, who had been murdered in a court conspiracy. Though Darius was able to secure the throne in 336 BCE, his reign was plagued by immediate challenges. The Persian Empire, weakened by decades of corruption, revolts, and ineffective leadership, was ill-prepared for the onslaught that was soon to come. Darius III's reign was not marked by any significant military or diplomatic achievements. Instead, his rule was consumed by the growing threat from the Macedonian king Alexander, whose rapid conquests would soon shatter the Persian world. The rise of Alexander and the confrontation with Persia. By the time Darius III ascended the throne, Alexander the Great had already begun his conquest of the Persian Empire. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed into Asia Minor, defeating the Persian forces at the Battle of Granicus. The following year, in 333 BCE, he secured a decisive victory over the Persian army at the Battle of Issus. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's superior tactics and the high morale of his troops led to a resounding defeat of Darius's forces. At the Battle of Issus, Darius III was forced to flee the battlefield, leaving his army behind. Although he eventually regrouped and attempted to mount a counter-offensive, the damage to his reputation was irreparable. The Persian king's inability to face Alexander on the battlefield, coupled with his failure to protect his army and his retreat, seriously undermined his authority. In the aftermath of the Battle of Issus, Darius III made a critical mistake. He failed to stand firm in the face of Alexander's growing power. The Persian king offered an enormous ransom and the return of Alexander's family in exchange for peace, but Alexander, confident in his position, refused the offer. Darius's actions only fueled the perception that he was weak and indecisive. Darius's final effort and betrayal by 330 BCE. Alexander had already conquered much of the Persian Empire, including the key cities of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. The fall of Persepolis, Persia's former heart and cultural center, marked the symbolic end of the Achaemenid dynasty. The Persian Empire was in disarray, and Darius III's military might was in tatters. In a final desperate attempt to salvage his rule and the empire, Darius III fled eastward, hoping to rally support from the satraps and armies of the Persian heartlands. However, his retreat was marred by betrayal. As Darius attempted to organize his forces to defend the eastern provinces, Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, seized the opportunity to betray his king. Bessus, possibly fearing that Darius's reign was doomed, declared himself king and had Darius captured. The betrayal of Darius III was the final blow to the Achaemenid dynasty. Darius, once a king with the potential to rally his people and defend his empire, was now a prisoner in the hands of his own satraps. According to historical accounts, Darius was taken in chains by Bessus and paraded through the eastern provinces. His capture and subsequent murder symbolized the collapse of the Persian Empire. The once great kingdom built by Cyrus the Great and expanded under Darius there had now been reduced to nothing. The murder of Darius III. Darius III's death came swiftly after his capture. While some ancient sources suggest that he was killed by Bessus, others imply that he was murdered by his own men, who may have viewed his capture as a disgrace. The exact circumstances of his death are unclear, but it is widely accepted that Darius was assassinated in 330 BCE, a few months before Alexander's final victory. Darius's death marked the definitive end of the Achaemenid Empire. With his passing, the Persian throne was effectively vacant, and the empire was left without a unifying figure to defend its borders or its interests. Alexander the Great, who had already crushed Darius's armies and taken control of much of the empire's core territories, now stood as the undisputed ruler of Persia. Alexander's conquest of Persia and the aftermath with Darius III's death. Alexander's conquest of Persia was complete. The Persian Empire, once one of the most powerful empires in the world, had been destroyed by a combination of military brilliance, political disarray, and internal betrayal. In the years following Darius's death, Alexander worked to consolidate his control over the vast territories that once belonged to Persia. He continued to spread Greek culture throughout the former Persian Empire, founding cities like Alexandria and promoting the fusion of Greek and Persian traditions. While Alexander's conquest of Persia was a stunning military achievement, it also marked the end of the Achaemenid dynasty. The fall of the empire was not just the result of Alexander's military prowess, but also of the internal weaknesses that had plagued the Persian kings for decades. Darius III's inability to unite the Persian people and defend his empire against Alexander ultimately led to the collapse of the Achaemenid dynasty. The legacy of the Achaemenid Empire. Although the Achaemenid Empire fell, its legacy continued to influence the world long after its demise. Persian culture, art, architecture, and governance left a lasting imprint on the regions it once ruled. Even after Alexander's death, the lands that were once part of the Persian Empire would continue to be a key point of contact between the Greek and Persian worlds, creating a lasting cultural exchange. The fall of the Persian Empire also highlighted the fragility of great empires. Despite its initial strength and longevity, the Achaemenid dynasty was ultimately undone by a combination of internal decay, political mismanagement, and external threats. The rise of Alexander the Great, a leader of extraordinary military ability and vision, brought about the fall of an empire that had once seemed invincible. As we reflect on the Achaemenid Empire's rise and fall, we are reminded of the complexities of empire building, how greatness can be built and destroyed in the span of a few generations, and how the world's great empires leave behind legacies that continue to shape history long after they have fallen. Section 14. Economic and social structures, the engine of the empire. As the Achaemenid Persian Empire reached its zenith, the economic and social structures that supported it became as crucial as the military might that expanded its borders. A complex network of trade, taxation, and local governance allowed Persia to maintain its vast territorial holdings for centuries, despite challenges both internal and external. The empire's economy, fueled by agriculture, resource extraction, and trade, allowed it to fund its military campaigns, maintain its infrastructure, and support a lavish court. Agriculture, the backbone of Persian society. The heart of the Persian economy lay in agriculture. The fertile lands of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Iranian plateau provided abundant crops, including wheat, barley, grapes, and dates. Persia's agricultural wealth was not only essential for feeding the empire's large population, but it also formed the basis for the tribute system that sustained the empire. The Persian kings levied taxes on the agricultural productions of their satrapies' provinces, a system that allowed the state to generate substantial revenue without overburdening the local population. The empire's agricultural economy also fostered regional specialization. Some provinces, such as Egypt, were known for their grain production, while others, like Lydia, contributed valuable resources such as wool and textiles. The Persian administration organized these resources to create an efficient system of tribute and trade, which ensured the continued flow of goods from across the empire into the royal treasury. To manage this vast agricultural wealth, the Achaemenid Empire established an efficient system of local governance. The satrapy system, which we've discussed before, was critical to the empire's ability to manage its agricultural output. Each satrapy was responsible for collecting taxes from the land, which were then sent to the central government in Persepolis or Susa. The tribute collected from agriculture helped fund the maintenance of the royal court, the military, and the extensive infrastructure projects that supported the empire. Trade and commerce connecting the world. In addition to its agricultural base, the Persian Empire's economy was bolstered by a thriving trade network that connected the various regions of the empire and beyond. The empire's size, spanning from the Mediterranean in the west to the Indus River in the east, made it a critical link in global trade. The Persians controlled key trade routes, including the Royal Road, which facilitated the movement of goods, people, and information across vast distances. The royal road, which stretched over 1,600 miles from Susa to Sardis, was more than just a military highway. It was a vital artery for commerce. Merchants traveled along its path exchanging goods such as Persian textiles, Babylonian grain, Egyptian papyrus, and Indian spices. The road also allowed the Persians to establish a postal system, which facilitated communication across the empire. Mounted couriers could cover the distance from one end of the empire to the other in a matter of weeks, helping to maintain the unity of the vast Achaemenid realm. Persian trade also extended beyond the empire's borders. The Persian kings maintained diplomatic relations with a number of foreign powers, including the Greeks, the Indians, and the nomadic tribes of Central Asia. Persian merchants traded goods such as silver, gold, and luxury items while also importing products like precious stones, textiles, and incense from other parts of the ancient world. Taxation, a well-organized system of tribute. The Persian economy was heavily dependent on the taxation system. Under Darius I, the empire's taxation was standardized, making it easier to collect tribute from the provinces. This system allowed the Persian Empire to generate revenue efficiently without overburdening any single region. Each satrapy was required to pay a fixed tribute, which was determined based on the wealth of the region. The system of tribute was flexible enough to account for the differing resources of each region. For example, regions that produced agricultural goods such as Egypt or Mesopotamia paid their tribute in grain, while regions rich in mineral resources such as Lydia paid in gold or silver. This system allowed the Persian Empire to collect a wide variety of goods from different regions, which could be used to fund military campaigns or support the royal court. At the local level, taxes were often collected by the satraps or local governors, who had the authority to enforce payment. While the taxation system helped to fuel the empire's military and political ambitions, it was not always popular among the local populations. As the Persian Empire grew, so did the demands for tribute, and the growing resentment among some provinces began to spark rebellions. Nevertheless, the Persians' ability to maintain such a vast and intricate system of tribute was a key factor in the empire's early successes. Social hierarchy and governance. The social structure of the Achaemenid Empire was hierarchical, with the Persian king at the top, followed by a class of nobles, military leaders, priests, and artisans. At the bottom of the social ladder were the peasants who made up the majority of the population. The king, or great king, was considered divine, his authority absolute, and his actions were seen as the will of the gods. Below him was a group of powerful nobles known as the aristoi, who governed the satrapies and played a key role in maintaining the empire's stability. The satraps were the most powerful local officials in the Persian Empire. They were often drawn from the Persian nobility, but many were also recruited from the local populations of the regions they governed. Their duties included collecting taxes, overseeing military forces, and administering justice. While the satraps had a great deal of autonomy in their provinces, they were also held accountable by the central government. The eyes and ears of the king, a network of spies and informants, kept watch over the satraps, ensuring that they remained loyal to the throne. Persian society was also deeply religious, and Zoroastrianism, the state religion, played a central role in the empire's governance. The priests of Zoroastrianism held significant influence in the royal court and were responsible for maintaining the religious and moral order of the empire. Zoroastrian beliefs, which emphasized the struggle between good and evil, were used to justify the king's role as a divinely ordained ruler. The religion's focus on truth, justice, and the protection of the natural world aligned with the Persian monarchy's image as protectors of civilization and order. Slavery and labor. The role of the lower classes. While the upper echelons of Persian society enjoyed the benefits of wealth, power, and prestige, The lower classes, especially the peasants and slaves, worked to support the empire's economic machinery. Slavery, though not as widespread as in some other ancient empires, was still present in Persia. Slaves were used in a variety of roles, including domestic service, military labor, and agricultural work. Prisoners of war were often enslaved, and some slaves were even employed in the royal court or in the construction of monumental projects such as the palaces at Persepolis. Peasants made up the bulk of the empire's population. They were responsible for the agricultural production that supported the empire's economy. While some peasants were free, others worked on land owned by nobles or the state and were bound to the land in a form of servitude. They paid a portion of their harvest as tribute to the satraps or the central government. In return, they were allowed to remain on the land and maintain a subsistence existence. Although their lives were hard, they played a vital role in sustaining the empire's economy. The end of the Achaemenid economic system. As the Achaemenid Empire began to decline, its economic systems, built over centuries, started to show signs of strain. The empire's vast size made it difficult to maintain control over distant provinces, and the resources needed to defend the empire's borders drained the royal treasury. The tributary system, which had once been highly efficient, began to break down as more provinces rebelled and local satraps grew more independent. Despite these challenges, the Persian economy continued to influence the regions that had once been part of the empire. The legacy of Persian governance, with its emphasis on taxation infrastructure and cultural exchange, continued to shape the ancient world for centuries. Though the Achaemenid dynasty fell to Alexander the Great, the social and economic structures of the Persian Empire left an enduring imprint on the regions it ruled. The Persian Empire's economic system, based on tribute trade and agricultural productivity, was a crucial factor in its ability to sustain such a vast and diverse empire. However, as the empire faced internal rebellion and external threats, the cracks in its economic and social structures began to widen, contributing to the eventual collapse of the Achaemenid dynasty. Section 15. The religious landscape, Zoroastrianism, and religious tolerance. The religious landscape of the Achaemenid Persian Empire was one of remarkable complexity, shaped by the empire's vast territorial expanse and its culturally diverse subjects. Religion played a central role in the daily lives of the Persian people, and the state religion, Zoroastrianism, deeply influenced the governance, culture, and identity of the empire. Yet the Persian kings, particularly under the Achaemenid dynasty, were also known for their tolerance toward the diverse religious practices of their subjects. This blend of religious unity and pluralism was one of the defining features of the Persian Empire, and helped maintain stability in a vast empire with diverse peoples. Zoroastrianism, the state religion of Persia. At the heart of the Persian religious worldview was Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest monotheistic religions in history. Founded by the prophet Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, sometime around the 6th century BCE. Zoroastrianism emphasized the worship of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god, who represented all that was good, just, and righteous in the world. The religion also focused on the duality between good and evil, embodied by the forces of Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu Ahriman, the evil spirit. Zoroastrian teachings stressed the importance of individual responsibility, promoting truth, order, and moral behavior in life. Zoroastrianism had a profound influence on the governance of the Achaemenid Empire. The kings of Persia were not only political rulers but also seen as divinely appointed to uphold the principles of Ahura Mazda. They were expected to maintain justice, protect the natural world, and ensure the prosperity of their subjects. The king's role was to be the earthly representative of Ahura Mazda, and his actions were considered to have religious significance. As such, the Persian kings, particularly Darius I, were careful to align their policies with the ethical teachings of Zoroastrianism. One of the most important aspects of Zoroastrianism in the Persian state was its emphasis on truth and justice. The concept of Asha, or divine order, was central to both the religion and the empire's political structure. Persian rulers were expected to uphold this divine order through their actions, ensuring fairness, harmony, and stability within the empire. This idea of Asha became a guiding principle for the governance of the Persian Empire and helped justify the king's authority and power. Religious tolerance in the Persian Empire. Despite the prominence of Zoroastrianism, the Achaemenid Persian Empire is often celebrated for its policies of religious tolerance. Unlike many ancient empires that imposed a single religious practice on their subjects, the Persians allowed the peoples they conquered to continue practicing their own religions. This policy of religious pluralism was one of the key reasons why the Persian Empire at its height was able to maintain control over such a vast and diverse territory. The Persian kings, especially Cyrus the Great and Darius I, were keenly aware that their empire encompassed many different cultures and religious traditions. Rather than imposing Zoroastrianism or another centralized religious practice on their subjects, the Persian kings respected local religious practices, allowing different groups to maintain their traditions. This helped to minimize resistance to Persian rule, as local peoples felt that their cultural and spiritual identities were being respected. One of the most famous examples of Persian religious tolerance is found in the treatment of the Jews. In 539 BCE, after Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon, he issued a decree allowing the Jews who had been exiled to Babylon to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This act of religious freedom was not an isolated incident. It was part of Cyrus's broader policy of respecting the religious practices of the peoples he conquered. The Cyrus Cylinder. An ancient artifact that records this decree is often considered one of the earliest declarations of human rights. Similarly, in Egypt, the Persians allowed the local priesthood to maintain its influence and control over religious practices. The Egyptians, who had long worshipped their gods as part of their identity, were given the freedom to continue their religious rituals and practices under Persian rule. This religious autonomy helped to ensure that Egypt remained peaceful and prosperous under Persian control. The role of Persian kings as religious figures. The religious status of the Persian kings was a defining characteristic of the Achaemenid dynasty. The kings, as divinely chosen rulers, were believed to be the intermediaries between the gods and the people. This role was not only political, but also spiritual, as the king's actions were viewed as reflecting the will of Ahura Mazda. The king's duties were seen as both temporal and divine, and his decisions were imbued with religious significance. The kings of Persia also built grand temples and religious structures as part of their efforts to promote Zoroastrianism and demonstrate their devotion to Ahura Mazda. The most famous of these was the construction of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, which was dedicated to the king's divine rule. Persepolis, with its grand palaces, elaborate reliefs, and majestic staircases, symbolized the divine order that the Persian king was meant to uphold. Despite the centrality of Zoroastrianism in the Persian state, the Achaemenid rulers were pragmatic in their religious policies. They understood the importance of local religions in maintaining social harmony and political stability. As a result, they adopted a policy of religious tolerance that allowed the empire's subjects to retain their religious identities while remaining loyal to the Persian king. This policy was one of the hallmarks of Persian rule, contributing to the empire's ability to maintain its power and cohesion over a vast and diverse territory. Religious pluralism and the long-term impact on the empire. The Persian Empire's policy of religious pluralism and tolerance had significant long-term effects on the development of the ancient world. By allowing different religious traditions to coexist within the empire, the Achaemenids fostered a climate of cultural exchange and intellectual development. Persian rulers were keen to promote not only Zoroastrianism but also the religious practices and philosophies of other cultures within their empire, such as the Babylonians, Egyptians, and Greeks. In the centuries following the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, the religious tolerance of the Persians continued to influence the Middle East. The spread of Zoroastrianism, along with other religious traditions, left an indelible mark on the region's religious and philosophical landscapes. The Persian emphasis on religious coexistence and the protection of local religious practices would later influence other empires, including the Parthians and Sassanids, who followed the Achaemenids in the Persian heartlands. The Persian Empire's religious policies also had a lasting impact on the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Zoroastrianism's dualistic worldview, with its focus on the eternal struggle between good and evil, influenced later religious thought, including the development of Christian and Islamic ideas about the afterlife and moral judgment. The Persian king's policies of religious tolerance helped set a precedent for later empires, including the Roman Empire, which would adopt a policy of religious pluralism, particularly during the reign of Emperor Constantine. The decline of Zoroastrianism and the Persian Empire. Despite the central role of Zoroastrianism in the Achaemenid Empire, the rise of Alexander the Great and the eventual fall of the Persian Empire marked a turning point for the religion. After the conquest of Persia, Zoroastrianism lost its status as the state religion, and its influence began to wane. Over the following centuries, the Sassanid Empire, which succeeded the Achaemenid dynasty, would revive Zoroastrianism as the dominant faith. However, by this time, the empire's political power had long since collapsed, and Zoroastrianism's role in the region would be diminished in the face of Islamic expansion. Nevertheless, the religious tolerance that characterized the Achaemenid Persian Empire would continue to resonate in the cultural and religious traditions of the Middle East for centuries to come, shaping the development of empires and civilizations in the region. Section 16: Persian Military Strategy, Innovations, and its final defeat, the Achaemenid. Persian military was one of the most powerful and diverse fighting forces in the ancient world, capable of conquering vast territories and maintaining control over an empire that stretched from the Indus River to the Mediterranean. However, despite its early successes and formidable reputation, the Persian military eventually faced challenges that would contribute to the empire's decline and fall. Understanding the structure, strategy, and innovations of the Persian military, and how these elements both led to its successes and its eventual defeat, sheds light on the reasons for the empire's eventual collapse. The structure of the Persian military. At its core, the Persian military was built on the foundation of a diverse and highly organized army that could quickly adapt to different combat environments. The Persian military structure was designed for flexibility and scale, accommodating a variety of troops, including infantry, cavalry, archers, and chariots. The empire's vast size and cultural diversity meant that the Persian army drew from many regions, incorporating different fighting styles and weapons. This diversity gave the Persians a considerable advantage, as they could leverage various types of troops, depending on the geographical or strategic requirements of a given campaign. One of the most famous components of the Persian army was the Immortals, an elite corps of soldiers who numbered 10,000. The Immortals were the backbone of the Persian military, serving as shock troops in battle. Their name came from the fact that their ranks were always kept full. When one Immortal fell, another would immediately take his place, making them appear as if they were immortal. The Immortals were heavily armed with spears, shields, and bows, and were highly trained in the art of warfare. The Persian army was also known for its use of cavalry. Mounted units played a crucial role in Persian military campaigns, particularly in the plains and open fields where cavalry could maneuver effectively. Persian cavalry was instrumental in battle, using speed and agility to overwhelm enemies. The Persian cavalry included light cavalry, which could harass enemy formations, and heavy cavalry, which could break enemy lines. These mounted troops were particularly effective in the wars against the Greek city-states, as the Greeks had less reliance on cavalry. In addition to infantry and cavalry, the Persian military made extensive use of archers, who were a core component of the army. Persian archers were trained to shoot with precision and could create powerful volleys of arrows that could break enemy formations from a distance. This use of ranged weapons gave the Persian army a significant advantage over enemies who relied more heavily on close-quarters combat. Innovations in warfare. One of the key strengths of the Persian military was its ability to innovate and adapt. Over the course of the empire's rise, the Persian kings and generals developed new tactics, strategies, and technologies that enhanced the effectiveness of the army. For example, the use of war elephants, though more common in the East, was introduced into the Persian military during Darius I's reign. These massive animals, outfitted with armor and armed with deadly weapons, were used to intimidate enemies and break enemy lines. They were particularly effective against infantry, although they could be difficult to control in battle. The Persian Empire also made significant advances in military logistics, which played a crucial role in its ability to fight and sustain long campaigns. The Persian army benefited from a highly organized supply system, ensuring that troops were well provisioned during campaigns. The Royal Road, which spanned over 600 miles, was a vital part of this logistical infrastructure, enabling the swift movement of troops and supplies across the empire. Persian forces could travel quickly between regions, giving them the advantage of surprise and mobility during campaigns. Additionally, the Persians used siege warfare tactics to conquer well-fortified cities. They built siege engines such as battering rams and towers to break through the defenses of enemy cities. The Persian Empire's use of siege warfare was particularly evident in their conquest of fortified cities like Babylon and Tyre, where they employed various tactics to undermine the city's defenses before launching full-scale assaults. The Persian Wars' defeat by the Greeks. Despite the many advantages of the Persian military, its encounters with the Greeks would reveal several critical weaknesses that contributed to the empire's eventual downfall. The Persian Wars, 499 to 449 BCE, were a series of conflicts between the Persian Empire and the Greek city-states, culminating in a series of battles that would ultimately reveal the limitations of Persian military power. The first major defeat for the Persians came at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. The Persian forces, led by Darius III, faced off against a much smaller Greek army led by the Athenians. The battle, though initially in favor of the Persians, turned into a stunning defeat for the invading force. The Greeks, using their superior knowledge of the terrain and their disciplined hoplite infantry, managed to encircle and destroy the Persian army. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the Greeks' tactical flexibility and determination proved too much for the Persians to overcome. The defeat at Marathon highlighted the vulnerability of the Persian army when confronted by smaller, highly organized, and motivated forces. The most significant defeat for the Persians came at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BCE, during Xerxes I's invasion of Greece. The Persian navy, which had been assembled to secure control of the Aegean and the Greek coastline, faced off against the Greek fleet in the narrow straits of Salamis. The Greeks, led by Themistocles, used the narrow waters to their advantage, outmaneuvering the much larger Persian fleet. The Persian navy, despite its numerical superiority, was decisively defeated. This loss crippled Persian naval power and marked the beginning of the end for the Persian invasion. The failure to conquer Greece not only marked a significant military setback for the Persians, but also highlighted several key weaknesses in their approach to warfare. The Persian military, despite its size and diversity, was less adept at adapting to the terrain and battle tactics of the Greeks. The reliance on a large, unwieldy army which was difficult to maneuver in the narrow passes and waters of Greece proved to be a major disadvantage. Internal instability and the decline of the Persian military. Following the Persian defeats in Greece, the Persian military's effectiveness continued to diminish. Internal instability, rebellion, and corruption within the satrapies weakened the empire's ability to maintain a strong military presence on its borders. The satraps, once loyal servants of the king, began to assert more independence and to operate with increasing autonomy. Some rebelled outright, further draining the empire's resources. The once strong Persian army began to suffer from a lack of discipline and coordination. The empire's vast size and diversity made it increasingly difficult to maintain control over distant provinces, and the growing political fragmentation led to military indecisiveness. As the Persian military's traditional strengths, its cavalry archers and elite infantry began to falter, Persia's enemies, including the Greeks and later the Macedonians, took advantage of these weaknesses. The Macedonian conquest, Alexander's final blow. The final defeat of the Persian military came at the hands of Alexander the Great, whose military genius and tactical brilliance shattered the Persian defenses. Alexander's victory at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE, where he decisively defeated the Persian forces under Darius III, marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire. The Persian military, despite its early successes, could not match Alexander's innovative strategies and the cohesion of his forces. Alexander's ability to outmaneuver and decisively strike at the heart of Persian military power was a testament to the limitations of the Persian army by this stage. In the face of a smaller, more disciplined, and more flexible force, the Persian military could not hold its ground. The legacy of the Persian military. While the Persian military eventually succumbed to Alexander's forces, its influence on future military strategies was profound. The Persian army's use of cavalry archery and siege warfare would be emulated by later empires, including the Romans and the Parthians. The organizational structure of the Persian military, including its use of satraps to govern distant regions, would influence military leadership in later empires. The Persian military's legacy also lives on through the image of the immortals, a symbol of the Persian military might that has captured the imagination of historians and military enthusiasts alike. Despite its ultimate defeat, the Persian military remains a symbol of the empire's strength and adaptability, and its role in shaping the ancient world should not be underestimated. In the end, the fall of the Achaemenid Persian Empire is not only the story of a great empire's decline, but also a tale of military innovation, resilience, and the inevitable vulnerability of even the mightiest of forces. As we continue to explore the decline of Persia, we will look at how the empire's military, once invincible, became a shadow of its former self, leaving the empire open to the relentless march of time and the rise of new powers. Section 17. The legacy of the Achaemenid Empire. Though the Achaemenid Persian Empire ultimately fell to Alexander the Great in 330 BCE, its legacy endured long after its collapse. The empire had redefined the ancient world, leaving a lasting imprint on governance, culture, and trade. From its administrative innovations to its architectural marvels, the Persian Empire's influence continued to shape the future of the Middle East, Europe, and beyond. Understanding the lasting legacy of the Achaemenid Empire offers a glimpse into the profound impact it had on civilizations that followed. Administrative innovations, the satrapy system, and bureaucracy. One of the most significant contributions of the Achaemenid Empire was its administrative system. The satrapy system developed by Darius that provided a framework for managing the vast and diverse empire. By dividing the empire into regions governed by satraps, local rulers or governors, the Persians were able to maintain control over a large territory while allowing for some degree of local autonomy. This decentralized system of government was one of the keys to Persia's success, and it became a model for later empires, including the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. The Persian satrapy system was built on a sophisticated bureaucracy, which included officials responsible for tax collection, military defense, and local governance. The central government in Persepolis maintained oversight of the satraps through a network of royal inspectors known as the eyes and ears of the king, who were tasked with ensuring that the satraps remained loyal to the throne. This level of administrative organization allowed the Persians to maintain control over a vast and diverse population, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indus River. The satrapy system's influence extended far beyond the Persian Empire. Many later empires adopted similar administrative structures. For example, the Macedonian Empire under Alexander the Great and his successors utilized a system of regional governors that closely mirrored the Persian model. The Roman Empire, known for its vast bureaucracy, also borrowed heavily from Persian governance in organizing its provinces. Cultural and religious tolerance. Another important aspect of the Achaemenid legacy was the empire's approach to cultural and religious diversity. The Persian kings, particularly Cyrus the Great, adopted policies of tolerance that allowed conquered peoples to maintain their religious and cultural practices. This inclusivity was in stark contrast to the more authoritarian rule of many ancient empires, where conquered peoples were often forced to abandon their traditions in favor of the empire's state religion and customs. The most notable example of Persian religious tolerance was the decree issued by Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE, which allowed the Jews exiled in Babylon to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This act is often seen as one of the earliest declarations of religious freedom in history. Similarly, the Persians respected the religious practices of the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and other peoples they conquered, creating an environment of cultural exchange rather than cultural suppression. This policy of religious tolerance helped to foster loyalty among Persia's diverse subjects. It also contributed to the spread of Persian culture, which absorbed and blended elements from many of the regions it conquered. As a result, the Persian Empire became a melting pot of cultures, religions, and traditions, creating a rich tapestry of cultural exchange that would continue to influence the ancient world long after the empire's fall. Architectural and artistic achievements. The architectural and artistic legacy of the Achaemenid Empire is perhaps most evident in the ruins of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital established by Darius I. Persepolis was a symbol of Persian grandeur, with its impressive palaces, monumental staircases, and elaborate bas-reliefs depicting the empire's military victories and royal processions. The city was not only a political center, but also a cultural hub where art, architecture, and religious symbolism converged. The Persepolis reliefs in particular offer a glimpse into the Persian worldview and the empire's emphasis on order, justice, and divinely sanctioned kingship. These artworks depict the king in a position of power and reverence, receiving tribute from various peoples of the empire, each represented with distinct cultural attire and offerings. The grandeur of Persepolis itself, with its massive columns and intricate carvings, became a model for later architectural projects in the ancient world, influencing both Greek and Roman construction. Beyond Persepolis, the Persians made significant contributions to art and craftsmanship. The Persians were known for their intricate metalwork textiles and pottery, which combined both Persian and regional artistic traditions. These works of art spread throughout the empire, helping to unify the diverse peoples of the Persian realm and leaving a lasting cultural legacy. The Persian language and influence on governance. The Persian language, particularly in its Old Persian form, was the official language of the empire. Darius I famously inscribed his royal decrees in Old Persian Elamite and Akkadian, a testament to the multicultural nature of the empire. Persian became the lingua franca of the vast empire, allowing for communication across regions and facilitating trade and diplomacy. It was the language of the royal court and administration. But it was also spoken by a wide range of peoples within the empire. Even after the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, the Persian language continued to be influential. The Parthian and Sassanid empires, both of which succeeded the Achaemenids, continued to use Persian as their primary language of governance. Furthermore, the Persian language and administrative practices influenced many of the later Islamic empires, including the Abbasid Caliphate, which adopted Persian as the language of its court and bureaucracy. The Persian legacy in the Islamic world. Although the Achaemenid Persian Empire was overthrown by Alexander the Great, Persian culture and governance left a deep imprint on the Islamic world. When the Arabs conquered Persia in the 7th century CE, they did not simply replace Persian traditions. Rather, they absorbed and adapted many aspects of Persian culture and governance. The influence of Persian bureaucratic systems, particularly the satrapy model, was evident in the Islamic caliphates. Persian administrators and scholars played key roles in the development of Islamic governance, and Persian literature, art, and architecture became highly influential during the Islamic Golden Age. The Persian language also enjoyed a revival as a literary language, particularly in the courts of the Seljuk Empire and later in the Timurid and Safavid empires. Alexander's conquest, a new era and the fusion of cultures. While Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia in 330 BCE marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire, it also set the stage for a new era of cultural fusion. Alexander's efforts to blend Greek and Persian cultures through the establishment of cities like Alexandria and his encouragement of intermarriage between Greeks and Persians laid the groundwork for the Hellenistic period. The Hellenistic Empire that followed Alexander's conquests, particularly under the Seleucid Empire, was a direct result of the Persian legacy. The blending of Greek and Persian traditions during this period gave rise to a rich cultural and intellectual environment that influenced art, philosophy, and science for centuries. Enduring influence on modern Iran, perhaps the most direct legacy of the Achaemenid Empire, is seen in modern-day Iran. The Persian Empire's cultural and political influence persisted in the region long after its fall. Iran's national identity is still deeply rooted in the history of the Achaemenids, and the empire's cultural achievements are a source of pride. The use of Persian as a language, the reverence for Persian literature, and the historical connection to the Achaemenid kings all form an integral part of Iran's cultural heritage. The Achaemenid Empire's commitment to cultural tolerance, its innovations in governance, and its legacy of monumental architecture remain foundational to the identity of Iran. Even today, the ruins of Persepolis and other Persian sites stand as testament to the grandeur of the empire and its lasting influence on the world. The lessons of the Achaemenid Empire. The rise and fall of the Achaemenid Persian Empire offers valuable lessons for understanding the complexities of empire building. The empire's successes lay in its ability to adapt, innovate, and integrate diverse cultures, while its decline stemmed from internal divisions, external challenges, and overextension. The empire's commitment to justice, cultural tolerance, and efficient governance provides an enduring model for managing large, diverse states. The fall of the Achaemenid Empire serves as a reminder of the fragility of even the greatest empires and the importance of balancing military, political, and cultural forces. Section 18. The Persian Empire and its modern legacy. Though the Achaemenid Persian Empire fell to Alexander the Great in 330 BCE, its cultural, political, and intellectual legacy continued to shape the world for centuries after its collapse. The Persian Empire had established foundational structures in governance, trade, and culture that resonated far beyond its time. Even in the modern era, the legacy of the Achaemenids remains influential, particularly in Iran and throughout the broader Middle East, where their impact is still felt in areas like administration, art, literature, and even geopolitical considerations. The enduring influence on Iran. The most immediate and lasting legacy of the Achaemenid Empire is found in modern-day Iran. The Iranian people have long regarded the Achaemenid period as a golden age of their ancient history. The Achaemenids were not just conquerors, but builders, creators of a vast and cohesive empire that stretched from the Indus River to the Mediterranean. Their achievements in governance, infrastructure, and cultural tolerance continue to be a source of national pride for the Iranian people today. The historical importance of the Achaemenid Empire is central to Iranian identity. The ruins of Persepolis, the empire's ceremonial capital, stand as a powerful symbol of Iran's imperial past and are revered as a national treasure. The relationship between modern Iran and the Achaemenid Empire is also deeply tied to the Persian language culture and the Persian pride in their ancient heritage. The Persian legacy in governance and bureaucracy. One of the most lasting legacies of the Achaemenid Empire is the system of governance it established. The Persian kings, especially Darius I, introduced a model of administration that balanced central authority with local autonomy through the satrapy system. This innovation allowed the Persian Empire to govern its vast territories with relative efficiency, accommodating the diverse cultures and peoples it controlled. This model of governance, which included a complex bureaucracy, influenced later empires in the region and beyond. In the centuries following the fall of the Achaemenids, many empires, including the Sassanid Empire, the Islamic Caliphates, and even the Ottoman Empire, adopted similar administrative structures. The satrapy system also impacted the governance models of empires in Europe, where centralized bureaucracies based on Persian ideas would become the foundation of modern nation-states. Even in the modern era, elements of the Persian administrative system can be seen in the bureaucratic structures of contemporary governments. The emphasis on decentralized administration, taxation systems, and the importance of roads and communication for effective governance are principles that continue to influence the organization of governments worldwide. Art, architecture, and cultural exchange. The Persian Empire's artistic and architectural achievements left a lasting impact on the ancient world and influenced the cultures that followed. Persepolis, with its grand palaces, intricate carvings, monks, and impressive reliefs, remains one of the most iconic symbols of Persian culture. The architectural styles and artistic forms that emerged during the Achaemenid period influenced the development of later Persian and Central Asian architecture, particularly during the Sassanid Empire. Moreover, the Persian legacy in art and architecture spread far beyond the empire's borders. The Greeks, who were influenced by Persian culture, incorporated elements of Persian artistic styles into their own designs, especially after Alexander's conquest. Even the Roman Empire, in its own period of expansion, was heavily influenced by Persian art, particularly in the fields of sculpture and monumental building. Cultural exchanges between the Persian Empire and other ancient civilizations, including those of India, Egypt, and Greece, contributed to the spread of knowledge, technology, and artistic forms. These exchanges helped shape the intellectual and cultural development of the ancient world. The Persian policy of religious tolerance also encouraged the free exchange of ideas and helped to foster a culture of intellectual and artistic creativity that continues to influence modern culture today. Religious influence and interfaith dialogue. The religious legacy of the Achaemenid Empire, particularly Zoroastrianism, has had a significant impact on world religious thought. Zoroastrianism, with its focus on the duality of good and evil, the importance of truth and the veneration of Ahura Mazda, was one of the earliest monotheistic religions and laid the foundation for later religious traditions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Elements of Zoroastrian thought, such as the concepts of heaven and hell, angels and demons, and the ultimate battle between good and evil, can be seen in the religious teachings of these faiths. The Persian king's policies of religious tolerance were also highly influential. By allowing different peoples within the empire to maintain their own religious practices, the Persians set a precedent for religious coexistence that would later be adopted by many empires, including the Roman and Byzantine empires and even the Islamic caliphates. The notion that an empire could be ruled with a degree of religious pluralism, where multiple faiths were practiced side by side, was a revolutionary idea that shaped the future of religious tolerance in the Middle East and beyond. The Persian Empire and its influence on modern geopolitics. In the modern world, the legacy of the Achaemenid Empire continues to resonate in the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. The Persian Empire at its peak controlled vast swaths of territory, and its reach extended into key regions that continue to be of strategic importance today. The borders of modern Iran largely coincide with the territorial heart of the Achaemenid Empire, and the influence of Persian culture and governance can still be seen in Iran's national identity and its policies. The legacy of Persian imperialism also affects how Iran interacts with its neighbors, especially in the context of its political ambitions. Modern Iran, while shaped by its Islamic identity, continues to draw upon the historical memory of its Achaemenid past, asserting its place as a regional power with ancient roots. The Persian Empire's emphasis on centralized control diplomacy and military prowess influences Iran's approach to foreign policy today. Moreover, the Persian legacy is important in understanding the broader geopolitical dynamics of the Middle East. The region's historical ties to the Persian Empire have created a complex web of political relationships that continue to evolve. Whether in terms of Iran's relationship with the West, its rivals in the Gulf, or its role in global affairs, the cultural, religious, and political legacy of the Achaemenid Empire still informs the region's modern politics. The role of Persian identity in contemporary culture. The legacy of the Achaemenid Empire is also alive in the cultural memory of the Iranian people. Persian literature, art, and history continue to be central to Iran's cultural identity. The poetry of figures such as Hafez Rumi and Ferdowsi, whose works reflect the enduring influence of Persia's ancient past, are celebrated both within Iran and abroad. These cultural treasures, which have been passed down through generations, help preserve the connection between the modern Iranian people and their ancient heritage. In addition, the ruins of Persepolis and other Persian archaeological sites continue to be sources of national pride and historical interest. These sites attract tourists, scholars, and historians from around the world, providing a direct link to the grandeur of the Achaemenid Empire. The rich cultural legacy of the Achaemenids remains an integral part of Iran's national narrative, and it is celebrated in the country's festivals, education, and cultural activities. The influence of Persian governance on modern administrative systems. The administrative system of the Achaemenid Empire, particularly the concept of centralized governance with localized autonomy through the satrapy system, influenced the development of modern statecraft. The principles of organization, taxation, and territorial governance that the Persians developed can be traced in modern political systems. The idea of creating large-scale, efficient bureaucracies to manage diverse territories and populations was ahead of its time and continues to be applied in today's administrative structures. The Persian model of governance, with its ability to balance central authority with local autonomy, was particularly influential in the development of the modern state. The satrapy system, in which regions were governed by local rulers while remaining accountable to the central government, inspired many later empires, including the Roman and Ottoman empires, which adopted similar systems of governance. Conclusion: the lasting legacy of the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, though it fell to Alexander the Great, left behind a rich legacy that influenced not only the ancient world, but also the modern era. From governance and administration to art, architecture, and religion, the Persian Empire's contributions shaped the course of history. Its policies of tolerance, cultural exchange, and military innovation continue to inspire and inform civilizations today. The fall of the Persian Empire may have marked the end of one of history's great superpowers, but its cultural, political, and religious legacy lives on in the modern world. Whether through the influence of Persian literature, the practice of religious tolerance, or the lasting impact of its bureaucratic systems, the Achaemenid Empire's reach extends far beyond its time. Its legacy remains as enduring as the ruins of Persepolis, symbols of a once great empire that continues to shape the world even thousands of years after its fall.